The moment Sienna Vale watched a hungry child stare at her son's fries, everything she thought she knew about wealth shattered. A billionaire CEO sitting incognito in a Houston diner, she'd built empires. But nothing prepared her for the quiet devastation in a single father's eyes as he gave his daughter tap water for dinner. What happened next didn't just change 4 lives. It exposed the invisible walls between worlds that should never have existed. Stay until the end and comment your city below. Let's see how far this story of unexpected grace can travel. The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner buzzed with that particular frequency that somehow felt like home. Not the kind of home that appeared in architectural magazines, but the kind that smelled like coffee brewed too strong and pancakes flipped 1,000 times on the same griddle. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening in Houston, and the dinner rush had settled into its comfortable rhythm. The clink of silverware against ceramic, the murmur of tired conversations, the occasional burst of laughter from the corner booth where the after-work crowd decompressed. Sienna Vale sat in a cracked vinyl booth near the window, her 5-year-old son Owen bouncing slightly as he organized his French fries into what he called a potato tower of power. She smiled, reaching over to steady his milk before his enthusiastic architectural endeavors sent it toppling. No one in this diner knew who she was. No one recognized the woman whose face had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times, whose signature appeared on contracts worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, whose decisions in the boardroom could shift markets and change industries. That's exactly how she wanted it. Tonight, she wasn't Sienna Vale, CEO of Valcor Industries. She wasn't the woman who'd started with nothing and built an empire through sheer force of will and 70-hour work weeks. She wasn't the billionaire whose name made investors lean forward and competitors nervous. Tonight, she was just mom, wearing jeans with an actual hole in the knee, a faded University of Houston sweatshirt, and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that hadn't seen a stylist's expert hand in weeks. "Mom, watch this one," Owen announced, carefully placing another fry across the top of his edible structure. His dark curls, so much like his father's had been, fell across his forehead as he concentrated with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could bring to French fry engineering. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Sienna said, and she meant it. These moments, simple, ordinary, uncomplicated by the weight of expectation and empire, were the ones she cherished most. In her world of private jets and corner offices, of board meetings and billion-dollar negotiations, an hour in a diner with her son eating burgers that cost $8.99 felt like oxygen. Owen grinned up at her, ketchup somehow already on his chin despite the fries not yet having been dipped. "Can we come here every Thursday, like a tradition?" "I think we can manage that," Sienna replied, reaching over to wipe his face with a napkin. "Every Thursday, just you and me. Deal?" "Deal!" Owen extended his small hand and they shook on it with exaggerated seriousness, the way they always did when making important agreements. The diner door chimed and Sienna glanced up reflexively, a habit from years of always being aware of her surroundings, of potential threats or opportunities, of people who might recognize her and shatter this carefully constructed anonymity. But the man who entered wasn't looking at anyone. His attention was focused entirely on the small girl whose hand he held, and even from across the diner, Sienna could see the weariness etched into his features like words carved into stone. He was tall, probably early 30s, with broad shoulders that suggested he was no stranger to physical labor. His clothes were clean but worn, jeans that had been washed so many times they'd faded to nearly white in places, work boots that had clearly logged serious miles, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with the kind of calluses that came from real work. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Even exhausted, even lined with worry, they held something fierce and protective when they looked down at the little girl beside him. The girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, had her father's eyes, large and expressive, framed by braids that someone had clearly taken time to make neat and careful. Her pink jacket was slightly too small, the sleeves ending well above her wrists, but it was spotlessly clean. She looked up at her father with complete trust, the kind of absolute faith children have before the world teaches them to doubt. Sienna watched as they slid into a booth 3 down from hers, the worn seats creaking under their weight. The man, she heard the waitress call him Marcus, picked up 2 menus but didn't open them immediately. Instead, he seemed to be bracing himself for something, his jaw tight with tension that had nothing to do with physical strain and everything to do with the numbers he was calculating in his head. "Daddy, can I have the pancakes?" the little girl asked, her voice carrying in the relative quiet of the dinner lull. "With the chocolate chips?" Marcus's expression flickered, just for a moment, so quick most people would have missed it, with something that looked like pain. "How about we share something, Lena? You pick what sounds good, and we'll split it. Make it an adventure." Lena nodded enthusiastically, already flipping through the plastic-coated menu with the kind of excitement that suggested this was a rare treat. "An adventure? Okay, the grilled cheese looks really good, and it comes with fries. We could share those too." "Perfect choice, baby girl, perfect choice." Marcus's voice was warm, but Sienna heard the strain underneath it, the way someone sounds when they're trying to make the best of something that shouldn't require making the best of. The waitress, Patty, according to her name tag, a woman who looked like she'd been working diners since before Sienna was born, approached their table with the coffee pot. "Hey there, sugar. What can I get you folks to drink?" "Just water for both of us," Marcus said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tap water's fine." "You got it, hun." Patty's expression suggested she'd seen this movie before, knew exactly what it meant when someone ordered tap water at a diner where even the sodas were cheap, but her voice remained cheerful, professional. "And what'll you have to eat?" "One grilled cheese, please," Marcus said. "We're sharing." Lena chimed in. "It's an adventure, miss." "Well, isn't that the best kind of dinner?" Patty said, winking at the girl. "I'll get that right out for you." As she walked away, Marcus pulled out his wallet, a battered leather thing that had clearly seen better years, and Sienna watched him carefully count the bills inside. His lips moved slightly as he calculated, and even from her booth she could see the tension in his shoulders ease just fractionally when the math apparently worked out. He had enough. Barely, but enough. Owen had abandoned his French fry tower and was now watching the other booth with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. "Mom?" he whispered, though his 5-year-old whisper carried clearly, "That girl is really looking at my fries." Sienna's gaze shifted to Lena, and her heart contracted in her chest like a fist closing. The little girl was indeed looking at Owen's plate, not with the simple desire of a child wanting someone else's food, but with something deeper. Hunger, real, undeniable hunger that had nothing to do with a missed snack, and everything to do with meals that came too far apart, too small, too uncertain. Lena's eyes tracked each fry on Owen's plate like she was counting treasures, her small hands clasped together on the table in front of her with careful discipline, as if she'd been taught not to ask, not to reach, not to want out loud. She swallowed hard, then looked away quickly when she realized someone might have noticed her staring. "She's hungry, Mom," Owen said, his voice dropping to an even quieter whisper. At 5 years old, he already understood that some truths needed gentle handling. Really hungry. Sienna felt something crack open inside her chest, not breaking exactly, but opening in a way that let in both pain and possibility. She'd written checks to charities, she'd funded programs and initiatives, she'd built a foundation that did genuine good work, but sitting 3 booths away from a father who was counting dollars to afford a single grilled cheese for his daughter, all of those abstractions suddenly became concrete and immediate and unbearably real. This wasn't a statistic. This wasn't a number in a report about food insecurity or childhood poverty. This was a little girl in pink jacket and careful braids who was hungry right now, whose father was doing everything he could with what he had, and it still wasn't quite enough to let her order her own meal without worry. The waitress returned with 2 glasses of tap water, and Lena thanked her with the kind of politeness that suggested excellent parenting under difficult circumstances. Marcus smiled at his daughter, and the love in that expression was so fierce and protective that Sienna felt it like a physical thing. "Want to play tic-tac-toe while we wait?" Marcus asked, pulling a pen from his shirt pocket and turning over one of the paper placemats. "I bet I can beat you this time." "No way!" Lena giggled, leaning forward eagerly. "I'm the tic-tac-toe champion." They bent over the placemat together, Lena's small hand guiding his larger one to show him where to draw the grid, her laughter ringing out when she immediately claimed the center square. Marcus let her win, Sienna could tell from the way he accidentally set up her 3 in a row, and Lena's triumphant celebration was so pure and joyful that it made Sienna's throat tight. Owen tugged on her sleeve. "Mom." She looked down at her son, whose face had taken on that serious expression he got when something was really important. "Yes, baby?" "Can we invite them to eat with us?" Owen asked. His small hand reached out and touched hers. "Please." "She needs fries, and we have lots of fries. And they're doing tic-tac-toe, and I'm good at tic-tac-toe. We could play together." Out of the mouths of babes, Sienna thought. Her 5-year-old son had just cut through every complicated adult consideration, every thought about pride and charity and the weird social dynamics of offering help, and gone straight to the simple truth: someone was hungry and they had food to share. But this required delicacy. Sienna understood pride. She'd lived on it during her own lean years, the days when she was building something from nothing and barely keeping the lights on. She knew how it felt to need help and how much harder it was to accept it than to give it. The last thing she wanted was to embarrass Marcus or make him feel small in front of his daughter. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart," Sienna said softly. "But we need to do it right. We need to make it about us wanting company, not about them needing help. Do you understand?" Owen nodded solemnly. "So it's like we're inviting them to be friends?" "Exactly like that." Sienna squeezed his hand. "Come on." They slid out of their booth, Owen clutching his mostly intact French fry tower on a napkin like a precious offering. Sienna's heart was beating faster than it did before major board presentations, and she found herself sending up a silent prayer to whatever gods looked after awkward acts of kindness. "Please let this go well. Please let me get this right." As they approached the booth, Marcus looked up, his expression immediately wary, the automatic defensiveness of someone who'd learned to be suspicious of strangers approaching with intentions unknown. But Lena's face lit up when she saw Owen, her eyes going immediately to the napkin full of fries he was carrying. "Hi," Sienna said, offering what she hoped was a warm, non-threatening smile. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your game. My name is Sienna, and this is my son Owen. He's been watching you two play tic-tac-toe, and he wanted to know if you might like to join us for dinner. We have way too much food. I always overorder, and it would be really nice to have some company." She watched Marcus's face carefully, saw the way his jaw tightened, the pride that flashed across his features, the automatic refusal forming on his lips. She pushed forward before he could speak. "Honestly, it would be doing me a favor," she continued, her voice casual, easy. "Owen needs to work on his social skills. His teacher says he's a little shy with other kids, and I'm terrible at tic-tac-toe. I always lose." She laughed self-deprecatingly. "Maybe you could teach me your secret, Lena? Owen tells me you're the champion." Lena's eyes had gone wide, looking up at her father for permission, but clearly wanting to say yes so badly that her whole body was vibrating with hope. Owen stepped forward, holding out his napkin. "I made a potato tower," he announced proudly. "But it's kind of falling down now, so we should probably eat it. Want to help? We could rebuild it together, but bigger." And there it was, the perfect child-to-child invitation that carried no weight of charity, no burden of adult pride, just one kid asking another kid to play with food, which was basically the international language of childhood friendship. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Owen, then at Sienna. She saw him wrestling with it, saw the pride warring with practicality, saw the weariness of a man who was carrying too much and didn't know how to set down even the smallest burden. But she also saw the way he looked at Lena's hopeful face, and she knew which side would win. "That's very kind of you, Ma," Marcus said slowly. His voice was deep, textured with a slight southern drawl that suggested roots somewhere farther east. "But we wouldn't want to impose—" "You're not imposing," Sienna said firmly. "You'd be helping. Please. I promise I'm not trying to be anything weird. I just thought it would be nice." She let her voice drop slightly, adding with genuine warmth, "And Owen's right. We really do have too many fries. They'll just go to waste." Lena was looking up at her father with those big, hopeful eyes, and Sienna saw the exact moment when Marcus's resistance crumbled. He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but sincere. "Okay," he said. "Thank you. Thank you." "Yay!" Lena bounced slightly in her seat, her joy so immediate and unguarded that it made everyone smile. Owen grinned triumphantly. "Come on! Our booth is the one with the best window view. You can see the parking lot and the street." As they gathered their water glasses and prepared to move, Patty appeared with Lena and Marcus's grilled cheese. She took in the situation with a glance, and Sienna saw approval flicker across her weathered face. "You folks move into the bigger booth?" Patty asked. "Want me to bring this over there?" "Yes, please," Sienna said. "And could we get another order of fries, the seasoned ones, and maybe some chicken tenders for the table? And 2 chocolate milkshakes for the kids?" She saw Marcus start to protest, and she met his eyes directly. "My treat," she said quietly, not as charity but as statement of fact. "Please, let me do this." For a long moment, they looked at each other, two people from completely different worlds, standing in a diner that smelled like coffee and hope. And then Marcus nodded once, a small gesture that cost him something in pride but gained him something in grace. "Thank you," he said again, and this time his voice carried the weight of everything unsaid. They settled into the larger booth, kids on one side, adults on the other. Owen immediately launched into showing Lena the proper architectural principles of French fry tower construction, his earlier shyness completely forgotten in the face of a new collaborator. Lena listened with intense concentration, adding her own innovations to the design. "Sorry about the tic-tac-toe interruption," Sienna said to Marcus, trying to ease the tension she could feel radiating from him. "Owen's right that I'm terrible at it, though. I never could figure out the strategy." "It's all about controlling the center and the corners," Marcus replied, some of the wariness leaving his shoulders as he fell into the comfortable rhythm of explaining something he knew. "Lena figured that out after about 3 games. Now I have to actually try to beat her." "Which you can't," Lena announced proudly, not looking up from the fry tower she and Owen were now constructing with serious intent. "Which I can't," Marcus agreed, and the love in his voice when he looked at his daughter was so deep and unmistakable that Sienna felt like she was intruding on something sacred just by witnessing it. Patty returned with the additional food, setting down platters of fries and chicken tenders that made Lena's eyes go wide. The milkshakes followed, chocolate with whipped cream and cherries on top, and Owen let out a whoop of delight. "Mom, you got the fancy ones with the cherries." "Special occasion," Sienna said, winking at him. "New friends." They ate together, conversation flowing more easily than Sienna had expected. Owen and Lena had that instant childhood connection that adults spend years trying to remember how to access, chattering about favorite colors and playground equipment, and whether dragons or unicorns would win in a fight. Marcus gradually relaxed, though Sienna noticed he ate slowly, carefully, like someone who wasn't used to having enough and wanted to make it last. "So what do you do, Marcus?" Sienna asked, keeping her voice light, conversational. "Whatever needs doing," he replied with a slight smile. "Right now, mostly day labor. Construction cleanup, warehouse work, some moving jobs. Whatever I can find that pays decent and lets me pick up Lena from school on time." "Her school's nearby?" "Yeah, just about 6 blocks from our place. Makes it easier." He paused, then added, "I'm looking for something more stable, but it's tough. Need something with the right hours, you know? Lena comes first." "Always," Sienna agreed softly. She understood that in her bones, the way parenthood reordered every priority, made every decision pass through the filter of what's best for them before considering anything else. "What about you?" Marcus asked, then seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, that's probably too personal." "No, it's fine," Sienna said quickly. "I work in business development, consulting mostly. It keeps me busy, but I make my own hours, which is nice." All technically true, just leaving out the part where she owned the company and consulting meant steering a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Single mom life is all about the juggle, right? "Right," Marcus agreed, and there was understanding in that single word. Recognition of a shared struggle, even if the specifics were different. They talked about Houston, about the neighborhoods they knew, about the challenges of raising kids in the city. Sienna was careful to keep her answers vague enough not to reveal too much, but genuine enough to maintain connection. Marcus talked about Lena's love of reading, how they hit the public library every week, how she was ahead of her class in reading level and wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. "A teacher," Lena confirmed when she overheard this, "so I can help other kids learn to read really good." That's wonderful, Sienna said warmly. The world always needs good teachers. Owen had chocolate milkshake on his nose and was explaining his own career aspirations. Either a astronaut or a guy who drives the big trash trucks. When Sienna noticed Lena's eyes starting to droop slightly. The day was catching up with her, the stress of hunger giving way to the comfort of a full stomach and the pleasant exhaustion of new friendship. Marcus noticed too. Getting sleepy, baby girl? No, Lena protested, but her yawn betrayed her. We should probably get going, Marcus said, though Sienna could hear the reluctance in his voice. This had been good, for both of them, for all of them. And endings are always harder when something feels rare and precious. Yeah, we should head out too, Sienna agreed. School night and all. As they gathered their things, Lena turned to Owen with serious formality. Thank you for the fries and the milkshake and teaching me about towers. You're welcome, Owen replied cheerfully. Want to play at the park sometime? My mom takes me to Herman Park lots of times. Can we, Daddy? Lena looked up at Marcus with hopeful eyes. We'll see, sweet pea, Marcus said, which Sienna recognized as parent speak for probably not, but I don't want to say no right now. They walked out together into the Houston evening, the air thick with humidity and the smell of the city, exhaust and flowers, and that indefinable scent of too many people living too close together. The parking lot's lights were just starting to flicker on, casting orange pools across the asphalt. Thank you again, Marcus said as they paused near an old Honda Civic that had definitely seen better years. Really, that was... Lena needed that. I appreciate it. It was our pleasure, Sienna said, and meant it. Really. Best Thursday dinner we've had in a long time. Owen was already tugging at her hand, pulling her toward where their own car was parked. A modest Toyota SUV she kept for these excursions. Nothing that would draw attention or suggest wealth beyond comfort. But she paused, something making her reach into her purse. Here, she said, pulling out a business card. One of the generic ones she'd had made, listing only her personal cell number and first name. If you're ever at Herman Park and want to meet up, give me a call. I meant what I said. Owen could use the social practice, and I think he and Lena would be good friends. Marcus took the card carefully, looking at it like it might be a trick or a trap. But then he met her eyes, and whatever he saw there seemed to reassure him. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I'd like that. They said their goodbyes, Lena and Owen waving enthusiastically at each other as they walked to their respective cars. And Sienna strapped Owen into his booster seat, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind was still back in that booth, watching a little girl count French fries like treasures. That was good, right, Mom? Owen asked as she slid into the driver's seat. We made new friends? Yes, baby, Sienna replied, her voice slightly rough. That was very good. I'm proud of you for noticing that Lena was hungry and wanting to help. It's not fair, Owen said with the blunt honesty of childhood, that she doesn't get to eat whenever she wants. We always have food. Why doesn't she? And there it was. The question that had launched 1,000 philosophical and economic debates, that had driven Sienna to build her foundation, that kept her awake some nights staring at ceilings and wondering if all her wealth and power actually meant anything if children 3 miles from her penthouse were going to bed hungry. Life isn't always fair, sweetheart, Sienna said carefully, pulling out of the parking lot and heading toward their actual home, the penthouse in the luxury high-rise that Owen thought they visited for work sometimes but actually lived in. Some people have more than they need, and some people don't have enough. It's complicated. Then we should uncomplicate it, Owen announced with 5-year-old certainty. We should make sure everyone has fries. Sienna laughed despite the tightness in her chest. You know what? You're absolutely right. We should. As they drove through Houston's evening traffic, Sienna found herself thinking about Marcus's tired eyes and careful pride, about Lena's careful braids and too small jacket, about the way a simple dinner at a diner had somehow felt more meaningful than any business deal she'd closed in years. She thought about the card she'd given Marcus, wondering if he'd call, hoping he would, but understanding if pride kept him from it. She thought about Owen's simple conviction that problems should be solved, that hungry kids should be fed, that fairness was something you created rather than something you accepted. And she thought about the invisible walls that divided their city into different worlds. Walls that kept a billionaire CEO and a day laborer from ever crossing paths under normal circumstances. Walls that made chance encounters at diners feel like providence rather than possibility. In the rearview mirror, she could see Owen already dozing off, his head tilted against the car seat, chocolate milkshake mustache still faintly visible on his upper lip. She smiled, her heart full and breaking at the same time. "Every Thursday," she whispered to herself, making a promise. "Every Thursday, we remember what matters." Behind them, the diner's neon sign glowed against the darkening sky. Rosie's Diner. Good food, good people. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sienna Vale felt like the second part of that promise was just as important as the first. The evening traffic swallowed their car, and the city moved on in its endless rhythm, unaware that something small but significant had shifted in the space between one dinner and the next, in the gap between one family's abundance and another's need, in the moment when a 5-year-old boy looked at a hungry girl and decided that friendship mattered more than distance. Somewhere across town, in a small apartment that Marcus and Lena called home, a little girl would fall asleep with a full stomach for the first time in days, dreaming of French fry towers and new friends and the possibility that maybe, sometimes, good things happen just because they should. And in a penthouse 40 stories above the city, a billionaire would lie awake long into the night, thinking about tap water and shared grilled cheese sandwiches and the look in a tired father's eyes when he counted dollars and hoped they'd be enough. 2 families, 1 meal, and the beginning of something that neither could have predicted but both desperately needed, a connection that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their place in the world, about the distance between different lives, about the possibility of bridges being built across chasms that seemed uncrossable. But that was still to come. Tonight was just the first step, the moment when kindness sat down at a diner table and invited strangers to become something more. The card sat on Marcus's kitchen counter for 3 days, propped against the coffee maker where he'd see it every morning, a small rectangle of cream-colored paper that somehow felt heavier than it should. Sienna's first name and a phone number, nothing else. No last name, no business title, no address. Just an invitation wrapped in 10 digits and a possibility he wasn't sure he had the right to claim. Thursday became Friday, became Saturday, and each morning Marcus would pick up the card, turn it over in his calloused hands, and set it back down without dialing. Pride was a strange thing. It kept your back straight when the world tried to bend you, but it also built walls around the very help you needed most. He'd spent 6 years raising Lena alone. 6 years proving he didn't need charity or pity or anyone's handouts, and the thought of calling a woman he'd met once to ask if they could meet at a park felt too much like admitting defeat. But Lena had other ideas. "Daddy, when are we going to see Owen again?" she asked on Saturday morning, sitting at their small kitchen table with a bowl of off-brand cereal that Marcus had watered down slightly to make the milk last longer. "You said we'd see." "I said we'd see, baby girl, not that we would," Marcus replied carefully, scrambling eggs in their one good pan. "That means maybe." "But I want to." Lena's lower lip jutted out in that way that always made Marcus's resolve crumble. "Owen's my friend now, and Miss Sienna was so nice. She didn't even get mad when I accidentally kicked her under the table." Marcus smiled despite himself. "You did not kick her." "Did too, when I was swinging my feet, and she just smiled and said it was okay." Lena took another spoonful of cereal, then added with the devastating logic of a 7-year-old, "Friends see each other, Daddy. That's what makes them friends." The card seemed to pulse on the counter, calling to him. Marcus divided the eggs between 2 plates, most for Lena, a smaller portion for himself, and sat down across from his daughter. She was wearing her favorite shirt, the purple one with the unicorn that was starting to fade from too many washings, and her hair was already coming loose from the braids he'd spent 20 minutes perfecting that morning. She looked happy, content, full for once, without that hollow look around her eyes that appeared when the groceries ran low at the end of the month. "Tell you what," Marcus said, making a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. "How about we go to the park this afternoon? And maybe, if Miss Sienna and Owen are there, we'll say hello." Lena's face transformed like sunrise, pure joy breaking across her features. Really? Really, really? Really, really. But no promises, okay? They might not be there. They'll be there, Lena said with absolute certainty. I just know it. Marcus wished he had his daughter's faith. At 28 years old, he'd learned that the world rarely arranged itself according to hope and wishes. But watching Lena bounce in her seat with excitement, he couldn't bring himself to dampen her spirits with his own cynicism. He waited until Lena was absorbed in coloring at the table before he picked up the card again, his thumb rubbing across the embossed numbers. The phone felt heavy in his other hand. This was stupid. This was presumptuous. This was exactly the kind of thing that never worked out the way you wanted it to. Rich people, and Sienna had to have money, even if she dressed it down, didn't actually want to be friends with guys like him. That dinner had been kindness, not an invitation to ongoing connection. But then he remembered Owen's unguarded enthusiasm, the way the boy had shared his French fries without hesitation or judgment. He remembered Sienna's eyes, warm, genuine, without that calculating look people sometimes got when they were doing charity and wanted you to know how generous they were being. And he remembered Lena's face when she'd had a full meal, the simple joy of a milkshake with whipped cream and a cherry on top. His daughter deserved friends. She deserved normal childhood things, like play dates and parks, and the kind of social connections that came so easily when you weren't counting pennies for bus fare. If his pride had to take a hit for that to happen, well, he'd swallowed worse. Marcus dialed before he could talk himself out of it. The phone rang twice, and then her voice came through, slightly breathless. Hello? Hi, Sienna. This is Marcus, from the diner? We met on Thursday with our kids. The words tumbled out faster than he intended, nervousness making him rush. I hope this isn't a bad time. Marcus, no, not at all. I'm so glad you called. Her warmth came through clearly, genuine and immediate, and some of the tension in his shoulders eased. How are you? How's Lena? She's good. Great, actually. She hasn't stopped talking about Owen since Thursday. He laughed, slightly embarrassed. I think she's decided they're best friends now. Owen too, Sienna replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. He's been asking every day when we're going to see the French fry girl again. That's his official name for her now. Marcus grinned. She calls him the Tower Boy. Kids are weird. The absolute weirdest, Sienna agreed. So, what's up? I was wondering if you and Owen might be at Herman Park this afternoon. We thought we'd go, and Lena was hoping. He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence without sounding desperate or presumptuous. We'd love to, Sienna said immediately, cutting through his awkwardness with easy grace. We were planning to go around too. There's a playground near the reflecting pool. Do you know it? Yeah, we know it. Relief flooded through him, mixed with something that felt dangerously close to excitement. That's perfect. We'll be there. Great. See you then, Marcus. See you then. He hung up and found Lena staring at him with eyes so hopeful they could have powered a small city. We're going to see them? We're going to see them. Her shriek of joy brought complaints from the neighbor upstairs, 3 loud bangs on their ceiling that meant keep it down. But Marcus couldn't bring himself to care. His daughter was happy. That was worth any amount of noise complaints. Herman Park on a Saturday afternoon was Houston at its most democratic. Families of every description spreading blankets under live oaks, joggers circling the paths in expensive running gear and ratty college t-shirts alike, tourists taking photos by the reflecting pool while locals pushed past with the efficient indifference of people who'd seen it all before. The October weather had finally broken the back of summer's humidity, leaving the kind of perfect autumn day that made people remember why they'd moved to Texas despite the 8 months of heat. Marcus and Lena arrived 15 minutes early. He couldn't help himself, years of labor jobs having trained punctuality into his bones, and found a bench with a good view of the playground. Lena sat beside him for approximately 30 seconds before the siren call of the jungle gym proved too strong. Stay where I can see you, Marcus called as she raced toward the climbing structure. I will, Daddy. He watched her scramble up the ladder with the fearless agility of childhood, her too small jacket flapping behind her, and felt the familiar mix of pride and terror that came with watching your kid navigate the world. She was so small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on him to keep her safe and fed and happy. The weight of that responsibility never got lighter. He just got better at carrying it. Tower Boy, Tower Boy. Lena's shout made him look up, and there they were, Sienna and Owen walking along the path, the boy tugging his mother's hand and pointing excitedly at the playground. Owen broke into a run the moment he spotted Lena, his little legs pumping as he raced toward the jungle gym. Sienna followed at a more sedate pace, and Marcus stood as she approached, suddenly very aware that his jeans had a stain on the knee from this morning's work, and his shirt was from Walmart's clearance rack. She, meanwhile, looked effortlessly put together in dark jeans and a soft green sweater that probably cost more than his entire outfit, her hair down in loose waves that caught the afternoon light. "Hi," she said, reaching him with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "We didn't keep you waiting, did we?" "No, we were early. I'm always early." He gestured toward the bench. "Want to sit? Watch them play." Perfect. They settled onto the bench, a comfortable distance apart, and watched as their children reconnected with the instant camaraderie of kids who'd decided friendship was a done deal. Owen was showing Lena something on the jungle gym, some complicated climbing route that involved hanging upside down and made Marcus's heart rate spike, while Lena demonstrated her superior monkey bar technique. "So how's your week been?" Sienna asked, her tone conversational, but her attention focused completely on him in a way that felt both flattering and slightly unsettling. People didn't usually look at Marcus like he was interesting. "Long," he admitted. "Had a good run of work, though. Been doing cleanup at a construction site in Midtown. 3 12-hour days, which is brutal, but the pay's decent." "That's exhausting." "It's what needs doing." He shrugged, uncomfortable with anything that sounded like complaint. "Better than sitting around, and it meant I could take Lena to the library yesterday afternoon, which is her favorite thing." "Owen loves the library too," Sienna said. "What does Lena like to read?" "Everything, but especially the Magic Treehouse books. We're on number 20-something. I lose track." Marcus smiled, pride creeping into his voice despite himself. "Her teacher says she's reading at a 4th grade level. 3rd grader reading 4th grade books." "That's impressive." "She's smart. Smarter than I was at that age, that's for sure." He paused, then added, "Her mom would be proud." It slipped out before he could stop it, a reference to the ghost that still haunted the edges of their lives. Sienna's expression shifted slightly, gentle understanding replacing casual interest. "Would be?" she asked softly. "Cancer, 3 years ago." The words were easier now, worn smooth by repetition, but they still carried weight. "Ovarian. By the time they caught it, it was stage 4. She fought hard, but..." He shrugged, the gesture encompassing everything words couldn't. "Lena was 4, barely remembers her." "I'm so sorry, Marcus." "Yeah, me too." He watched Lena swing across the monkey bars, so alive and vibrant and here. "But we're managing. We're okay." "What about Owen's father?" Marcus asked, turning the conversation away from his own grief. "If you don't mind me asking." Sienna's laugh was short and slightly bitter. "I don't mind. He decided fatherhood wasn't for him about 6 months after Owen was born. Signed away his rights, pays nothing, has no contact. His loss." "Definitely his loss," Marcus agreed, watching Owen help Lena climb to the top of the slide. "Kid seems great." "He is. He's my whole world." Sienna's voice carried the same fierce protectiveness Marcus felt when he looked at Lena. "Single parenting is hard, but I wouldn't trade it, even on the days when I want to hide in the bathroom with a bottle of wine." Marcus laughed. "I feel that, though for me it's cheap beer in the kitchen after she goes to bed." They fell into comfortable conversation, the kind that happens when two people realize they speak the same language, not English or Spanish or any verbal tongue, but the deeper dialect of solo parenthood, of sacrifice and fierce love and doing whatever it takes. They talked about bedtime battles and picky eating, about the weird things kids say and the impossible questions they ask, about the guilt that came with never quite feeling like you were doing enough. "Last week," Sienna confided, "Owen asked me why we don't have a dad at our house like his friend Josh does, and I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make him feel like something was missing." "What did you tell him?" "That families come in all different shapes, that we have each other, and that's enough." She smiled ruefully. Not sure he bought it, but he seemed satisfied for now. "Lena asks about her mom sometimes," Marcus said quietly. Wants to know what she was like, what she would think about things. I tell her stories, show her pictures, but I worry she's going to forget, or worse, that she already has. She won't forget. Not really. Sienna's hand moved slightly, like she was going to reach for his, but thought better of it. Maybe not the details, but the love. That stays. That shapes who they become. They watched the kids in silence for a moment. Owen and Lena now engaged in some elaborate imaginary game involving the jungle gym being a spaceship and the wood chips being lava. Their laughter carried across the playground, pure and uncomplicated. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, the question emerging before he'd fully thought it through. "Sure. Why'd you really invite us to sit with you? At the diner?" He turned to look at her directly. "And I'm not trying to be rude or ungrateful, I guess I'm trying to understand. People don't usually go out of their way, you know?" Sienna was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Owen noticed Lena was hungry, and he asked if we could invite you to share our food, and I thought about saying no, about all the complicated adult reasons why that might be awkward or inappropriate, but then I realized those were my hang-ups, not his. He just saw someone who needed something and wanted to help." She looked at Marcus now, her eyes serious. "I want him to keep that instinct to notice and care and act, because it's so easy to stop seeing people, you know, to let them become invisible, and I never want my son to think that's okay." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of someone who actually meant what they said, who wasn't performing kindness for an audience, but living it because it mattered. "That's a good answer." "It's the true answer," Sienna replied. "Plus, you seemed like good people, and Lena's wonderful. Anyone can see that." "She is," Marcus agreed, his voice thick. "She's the best thing I ever did." "Owen, too. Only thing I've ever done that feels like it really matters." They sat with that shared understanding, two parents who'd learned that everything else, careers, ambitions, money, status, was just background noise compared to the small humans who called them mom and dad. The afternoon stretched out in that golden way October afternoons do in Houston, the light turning honey-colored as it slanted through the trees. Marcus and Sienna talked more, sharing stories and laughs, while their kids played with the boundless energy of childhood. Other parents came and went, setting up elaborate picnics or chasing toddlers or scrolling through phones while their kids climbed and swung and ran. Around 4 o'clock, Lena ran over, her face flushed and happy. "Daddy, can Owen come to our house to play?" Marcus's stomach dropped. Their apartment was clean. He made sure of that. But it was small and obviously poor, with furniture from Goodwill and toys from yard sales. The idea of Sienna seeing exactly how they lived, seeing the careful poverty he tried so hard to dress up in dignity, made his mouth dry. "Baby girl, I don't know if... Actually, I was going to suggest we grab ice cream," Sienna interrupted smoothly, reading the panic on his face with unsettling accuracy. "There's a place just outside the park." "My treat?" "Ice cream," Owen shouted from the top of the slide. "Can we, Mom? Please?" Marcus looked at Sienna, silently grateful and slightly embarrassed that she'd so obviously rescued him. She met his gaze steadily, and he saw no pity there, just understanding between two people navigating the complicated dance of new friendship across unfamiliar terrain. "Ice cream sounds great," he said finally, "but I'm buying Lena's." "Deal," Sienna agreed, though Marcus suspected she'd find a way around that somehow. They walked to the ice cream shop, a local place that made their own flavors and charged tourist prices, with the kids running ahead, stopping to examine interesting leaves and chase a squirrel and argue about whether dinosaurs could beat dragons in a fight. Marcus found himself walking close enough to Sienna that their arms occasionally brushed, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, but not overwhelming. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly so the kids wouldn't hear. "Back there, with the house thing." "I know," Sienna replied, "but I remember what it's like to not want people to see where you live. Before I got my current job, I had a studio apartment where the bathroom door didn't close all the way, and you could hear every word the neighbors said through the walls. I once avoided inviting a friend over for 3 months because I was so embarrassed." Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "Really?" "Really, and you know what?
When I finally did invite her over, she didn't care at all. She was just happy to see me. Sienna smiled. Most of the shame we carry is about things other people won't even notice. Maybe, Marcus conceded, but still, thank you.
At the ice cream shop, Lena pressed her face against the glass display case like she was examining the crown jewels, her eyes enormous as she tried to decide between chocolate chip and strawberry. Owen had already committed to mint chip with gummy bears, a combination that made Marcus's teeth hurt just thinking about it. "The strawberry," Lena finally announced. "In a cup, please." "Cone's more fun," Sienna said to the teenager working behind the counter. "Give her a cone." "But cones are more," Marcus started. "Cones are more fun," Sienna repeated, her tone allowing no argument. "And it's Saturday. Saturday means fun." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, to insist on paying for his daughter's ice cream himself, to maintain some shred of independence in this increasingly complicated dynamic. But then Lena turned to him with strawberry ice cream already on her nose and a smile so bright it could have guided ships home, and he realized his pride mattered exactly zero compared to her happiness. "Thank you," he said to Sienna, meaning it for more than just the ice cream. "You're welcome," she replied, meaning she understood it was about more than just the ice cream. They found a table outside, the kids attacking their cones with single-minded focus, while the adults sipped coffee that came with the overpriced territory. The late afternoon crowd swirled around them, couples on dates, families with strollers, groups of teenagers trying to look cool while obviously enjoying their dessert. "So what's Lena's school like?" Sienna asked, and they fell back into the easy conversation that had marked the afternoon, trading information about teachers and curriculum and the politics of elementary school social dynamics. Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did with people outside his immediate circle of work buddies and Lena's school parents. Sienna asked questions that showed genuine interest, laughed at his stories, shared her own struggles with homework battles and playground drama. She treated him like an equal, not with the careful condescension of someone doing charity, but with the respect of one adult to another. It was so unexpected that it made him suspicious. People like her didn't just decide to be friends with people like him. There had to be an angle, a reason, something she wanted that he wasn't seeing yet. But as the afternoon stretched into evening and the kids moved from ice cream to the small playground adjacent to the shop, Marcus couldn't figure out what it was. She seemed genuinely happy to be here, content to spend her Saturday with a broke-day laborer and his daughter. "I should probably get Lena home," Marcus said eventually, watching his daughter unsuccessfully try to teach Owen how to pump his legs on the swing. "It's almost dinner time." "Same," Sienna agreed, though neither of them moved immediately. "This was really nice. We should do it again." "Yeah?" Marcus couldn't keep the surprise out of his voice. "Yeah. Owen had a blast, and honestly, so did I." She smiled at him, and there was something vulnerable in it, like she was admitting more than she'd intended. "It's nice to talk to another adult who gets it. Most of my—" She hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Most of the people I know don't really understand the single-parent thing." "Well, you've got an open invitation to commiserate any time," Marcus said, surprising himself with his own boldness. "We're pretty much always around, not like we have busy social calendars to maintain." Sienna laughed. "Same, actually. My social life consists of work calls and bedtime stories." They gathered their kids who protested, leaving with the passionate fury of children whose perfect day was being interrupted. Promises of next time and soon mollified them somewhat, though Lena made Marcus Pinky swear they'd see Owen again before the next century. As they walked back through the park toward the parking area, Owen grabbed Sienna's hand and Lena grabbed Marcus's, and somehow the four of them ended up holding hands in a chain, the kids in the middle, swinging between the adults and laughing as they walked. It felt so natural, so right, that Marcus almost didn't notice when they reached the lot and had to break apart. "Text me," Sienna said as they reached her car, a nice but not extravagant SUV that probably cost more than Marcus had made in the last year, but wasn't flashy about it. "You want my number?" Marcus pulled out his phone, an older model with a cracked screen that suddenly seemed even more battered next to hers. "Of course I do. How else am I going to send you pictures of the Tower Empire Owens building in our living room?" They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar intimacy of the gesture.
Friends exchanged numbers all the time, Marcus reminded himself. This was normal. This was fine. This didn't mean anything except that they'd met up again sometime. "Bye, Tower Boy," Lena called as they headed toward Marcus's beat-up Civic. "Bye, Fry Girl," Owen shouted back, waving enthusiastically. The drive home was quiet, Lena dozing in her booster seat, exhausted from hours of playing and social stimulation. Marcus drove on autopilot, his mind replaying the afternoon, looking for the catch he was sure had to be there. Nobody was this nice without wanting something. Nobody befriended the broke guy out of pure goodwill. But he couldn't find it. Whatever Sienna's angle was, it remained invisible. His phone buzzed as he pulled into their apartment complex, a text from an unknown number that could only be her. "Owen says to tell Lena he's building a tower that goes to the moon. The competition is officially on." Marcus smiled despite himself and texted back, "She says the moon is too close. She's building one to Mars." The response came almost immediately. "Game on." He carried sleeping Lena up 2 flights of stairs to their apartment, her head heavy on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. She barely stirred as he got her into pajamas and tucked her into bed, her day of joy leaving her completely spent. Marcus made himself a sandwich, peanut butter, the cheap kind, and sat at their small kitchen table, looking at the text conversation on his phone. 3 messages, friendly and light and completely unexpected. He should probably be more careful, should protect himself and Lena from getting too attached to something that was likely temporary. Rich people played at friendship with poor people sometimes, enjoyed the novelty until reality got too uncomfortable, then drifted away. But as he sat there in his quiet apartment, listening to his daughter's soft breathing from the next room, Marcus couldn't quite make himself care about being careful. Lena had smiled more today than she had in weeks. She'd had ice cream and a friend and hours of play. And he'd had something he hadn't realized he was missing, adult conversation with someone who saw him as a person, not a statistic or a charity case or invisible. Maybe it wouldn't last. Maybe Sienna would eventually figure out that befriending someone from his world was more trouble than it was worth. But for today, for this moment, it had been real and good, and his daughter had been happy. That had to be worth the risk. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Sienna, this time a photo of Owen collapsed on their couch, ice cream stains on his shirt, and a smile on his sleeping face. The caption read, "Successful Saturday." Marcus snapped a picture of Lena sleeping, clutching the stuffed elephant that was her most prized possession, and sent it back. Very successful. 3 dots appeared, showing Sienna was typing, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Then finally, "Same time next week?" Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every cautious instinct he'd developed over 6 years of solo survival told him to slow down, to be careful, to not let Lena get too attached to something that might disappear. But then he thought about his daughter's face when she'd shouted "Tower Boy" across the playground, about the way she'd fallen asleep happy and full and already dreaming of next time. He typed back, "Yeah, same time next week." And just like that, Saturday afternoons at Herman Park became a thing. Not a plan exactly, not yet a tradition, but a possibility that felt dangerously close to both. A small routine being built between 2 families who should never have crossed paths, who lived in different worlds, but had somehow found common ground in the space between jungle gyms and ice cream shops. Marcus lay in bed that night, his mattress on the floor of the living room, giving Lena the apartment's only bedroom, and wondered what the hell he was doing. Getting close to someone who would eventually see how little he had and drift away? Setting Lena up for disappointment when reality reasserted itself and reminded them where they belonged? But sleep came anyway, and with it dreams of a little girl laughing on a swing and a woman with kind eyes who treated him like he mattered. And for once, Marcus didn't wake up at 3 a.m. worrying about money or the future, or all the ways he was failing. For once, he just slept, his phone on the floor beside him showing a text thread that proved sometimes, against all odds and logic, good things happen just because they should. Saturday afternoons became the rhythm their lives moved to, a steady beat that gave shape to weeks that had previously blurred together in an exhausting cycle of work and survival. 3 weeks passed, then 4, then 6, and what had started as a tentative maybe friendship solidified into something that felt permanent enough to build plans around. Lena started marking the calendar with hand-drawn hearts on Saturdays, counting down the days until she could see Owen again. Marcus found himself checking his phone more often than he'd like to admit, reading and rereading Sienna's texts about playground politics and kindergarten drama. They fell into an easy pattern. The park first, letting the kids burn energy while the adults sat on their bench and talked about everything and nothing. Then ice cream, or sometimes just a walk around the reflecting pool, the four of them moving through Herman Park like a unit that had always existed. Sienna never pushed for more, never suggested meeting anywhere that would require Marcus to spend money he didn't have or reveal the full extent of how tightly he was stretching every dollar. She seemed to understand instinctively where the boundaries were and respected them without making Marcus feel like he was the one setting limits. But understanding boundaries and crossing them were two different things, and the crossing happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late November when Marcus least expected it. He'd picked up a 3-day job cleaning a luxury condo building in downtown Houston, the kind of place where the lobby had marble floors and a doorman who looked at workers like they were vaguely distasteful but necessary elements of maintaining civilization. The pay was good, better than good actually, and Marcus had jumped at it despite the 12-hour shifts. 3 days of this and he could pay rent early, maybe even get Lena that winter coat she needed, the one that actually fit instead of the too small hand-me-down she'd been making do with. The work was mindless in the way physical labor often was, giving his body something to do while his mind wandered. He thought about Lena's upcoming parent-teacher conference, about the weird noise his car was making that he couldn't afford to fix, about Saturday and whether they should try the playground on the south side of the park for variety. He thought about Sienna's laugh, the way she tilted her head when she was really listening, the comfortable silences that had started appearing between them that didn't need filling with words. He was on his knees in the lobby, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn stain on the marble, when he heard her voice, "No, that's not going to work. The Henderson contract requires delivery by the 15th, and if we can't guarantee that timeline, we need to renegotiate the terms before they involve lawyers. I don't care if it's inconvenient. Make it happen." Marcus's head snapped up so fast he almost dropped his scrub brush. There, striding across the lobby with the kind of confidence that parted crowds, was Sienna. But not the Sienna he knew, not the woman in jeans and casual sweaters who sat on park benches and got ice cream stains on her sleeves from helping kids. This was someone else entirely. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car, the kind of perfect tailoring that screamed money and power. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek style that made her look 10 years older and infinitely more intimidating. She moved like she owned the building, which Marcus realized with dawning horror she might actually do, surrounded by 3 people in equally expensive suits who were practically jogging to keep up with her long-legged stride. "I need the updated projections by 5, she was saying to a man with silver hair and an iPad clutched like a lifeline. "And tell Davidson if he misses another deadline, he's done. I don't care if he's been with the company for 20 years. Excellence isn't negotiable." They swept past Marcus without a single glance, deep in conversation about millions of dollars and corporate strategies that might as well have been in a foreign language. He was kneeling on the floor 3 feet from where she passed, scrubbing brush in hand, wearing the company polo that identified him as exactly what he was: the help, invisible and irrelevant to the real business of the building. The elevator doors closed behind her entourage, and Marcus sat back on his heels, his heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. The marble floor was suddenly the most interesting thing in the world because he couldn't bring himself to look up, couldn't bear to see if anyone had noticed his reaction, couldn't process what he'd just witnessed. She hadn't seen him. Thank God she hadn't seen him. But that almost made it worse. The casual invisibility, the way she'd walked past without even registering his existence. Not because she was cruel, but because people like her didn't see people like him. They existed in different orbits, different universes, and the fact that they intersected at all was some kind of cosmic joke. "Hey man, you okay?" One of his coworkers, Tommy, a guy in his 50s who'd been doing this work longer than Marcus had been alive, paused with his mop. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Yeah, I'm fine," Marcus managed, though his voice sounded strange even to his own ears. "Just zoned out for a second." "This place'll do that to you," Tommy agreed, going back to his mopping. "Rich people everywhere, acting like we're furniture. Gets old." Marcus nodded mechanically and returned to scrubbing, but his hands were shaking. The stain he'd been working on suddenly seemed impossibly important, something he could control and understand, unlike the mess his head was becoming. She was rich. Not comfortable, not doing well rich. Actually, seriously, owns buildings and has assistants rich. The kind of rich that Marcus couldn't even properly conceptualize because it existed so far outside his experience. And she'd been playing at, what? Friendship? Some kind of social experiment to see how the other half lived? He thought about all their conversations, suddenly hearing them differently. When she'd talked about her job in business development, she'd actually meant she ran something huge enough to have Henderson contracts and people named Davidson who could be fired after 20 years. When she'd casually bought ice cream and waved away his offers to pay, it hadn't been simple generosity. It had been someone for whom the cost was so meaningless she probably didn't even track it. The worst part was the memory of himself sitting on that park bench, talking about his day labor jobs and library visits like they were equivalent experiences. Him, explaining budget grocery shopping to a woman who probably spent more on her suit than he made in 6 months. The embarrassment of it crashed over him in waves, each one worse than the last. Marcus finished his shift on autopilot, his body going through the motions while his mind spun in increasingly painful circles. He couldn't go back to the park on Saturday. He couldn't sit next to her on that bench knowing what he knew now. Couldn't pretend they were just two single parents with something in common. They had nothing in common. They never had. He'd just been too blind to see it. The drive home was a blur. Lena was at after-school care until 6, one of the few blessings of his current schedule, which gave him time to sit in his apartment and stare at the walls and try to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. His phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. Owen's teacher says they're doing a project on friendship this week. He told the whole class his best friend is the girl with the braids who's really good at climbing. Pretty sure he means Lena. Marcus stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He should respond. He always responded. They texted most days now. Nothing heavy, just quick updates and funny kid stories and the occasional meme that made them both laugh. But his fingers wouldn't move. Couldn't type anything that wouldn't sound wrong or bitter or hurt. 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing again. Everything okay? You're usually faster at the emoji reactions than this. He forced himself to type back. Yeah, sorry, long day at work. Talk later? Of course, get some rest. Marcus set his phone face down on the counter and put his head in his hands. He was being stupid. So what if Sienna had money? That didn't change the fact that Owen and Lena were genuinely friends, that the kids loved their Saturday afternoons together. His pride was hurt, sure, but that was his problem, not theirs. He should be able to put it aside for Lena's sake. Except he couldn't shake the image of Sienna striding across that marble lobby, completely in her element, wielding power like a weapon while he knelt 3 feet away scrubbing floors. The distance between those two versions of reality felt unbridgeable. He picked up Lena at 6 and her excited chatter about her day, about the math worksheet she'd gotten a star on, and the boy who'd brought a hamster for show and tell helped push the thoughts back temporarily. But they returned that night after she was asleep, when the apartment was quiet and he was alone with too much time to think. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday passed in an uncomfortable haze. Marcus responded to Sienna's texts but kept them brief, using work as an excuse for his distraction. She didn't push, but he could sense her confusion in the changing rhythm of their conversation. They'd developed a rapport, a back and forth that flowed easily, and now it was stilted and strange. Saturday morning arrived with Lena bouncing on his mattress at 7 a.m., already dressed and ready for the park, despite them not needing to leave for 6 more hours. "Daddy, wake up! It's Saturday! Owen Day!" Marcus groaned and pulled a pillow over his face. "Baby girl, it's too early. Go watch cartoons." "But I'm excited." She tugged at his arm with surprisingly strong 7-year-old persistence. "Can we bring the frisbee today? Owen said he wants to learn to throw it." The frisbee. Right, because he'd mentioned in passing that he had one, and Owen had immediately demanded to try it next time, and Marcus had promised without thinking about whether there would be a next time. He should cancel. He should text Sienna right now and make up some excuse. He was sick. Lena was sick. Something came up, anything to avoid sitting on that bench pretending everything was normal when his entire understanding of their friendship had been revealed as a delusion. But then Lena scrambled off the mattress and ran to get her shoes, the cheap sneakers from Payless that were already getting too small, and started practicing her frisbee throwing motion with an imaginary disc.
Her joy was so pure and uncomplicated, so utterly untouched by adult baggage about class and money and who belonged where. Marcus dragged himself out of bed. He'd go to the park. He'd let the kids play. And then he'd figure out how to gracefully extract himself and Lena from a situation that had been doomed from the start. Hermann Park looked exactly the same as it had every other Saturday, which felt wrong somehow. It should have changed to reflect Marcus's internal landscape, darker, more complicated, less welcoming. But the live oaks still spread their branches in patient benediction, the reflecting pools still caught the sky and multiplied it, and their bench sat empty and waiting near the playground. Sienna and Owen were already there when they arrived, Owen spotting Lena immediately and racing over with the kind of full-body enthusiasm that nearly knocked her over. "Fry girl, guess what? I lost a tooth." He opened his mouth to display the gap. "See? The tooth fairy brought me $5 whole. Wow." Lena peered at the gap with appropriate admiration. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. Come on, let's go on the swings." They took off together, and Marcus was left standing 10 feet from the bench where Sienna sat, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She looked like herself today, jeans, a soft blue sweater, hair in a ponytail, but now Marcus couldn't unsee the other version, the real version, the woman in the expensive suit making million-dollar decisions. "Hi," she said, patting the bench beside her. "You okay? You seemed off this week." "Yeah, fine. Just work stuff." He sat down, maintaining more distance than usual, the gap between them suddenly feeling both too wide and not wide enough. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." Sienna was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could feel her studying him, trying to figure out what had changed. He kept his eyes on the kids, watching Lena push Owen on the swing with fierce determination. "Did I do something wrong?" Sienna asked finally, her voice careful. "No." The word came out too sharp, and he tried to soften it. "No, you didn't do anything. I'm just tired." "Marcus." She waited until he looked at her. "We've been doing this for weeks now. I'd like to think we're friends. And friends are honest with each other." The word friends made something twist in his chest. "Are we, though? Are we what? Friends?" He couldn't keep the bitterness out entirely. "Or is this some kind of project for you? Some way to feel good about yourself by helping out the poor guy and his kid?" Sienna's face went very still. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you," Marcus said, the words tumbling out now that he'd started. "Tuesday, at the condo building on Travis. You walked right past me." Understanding flashed across her features, followed immediately by something that looked like dismay. "Oh God, you were working there, scrubbing your lobby floor while you gave orders about Henderson contracts and firing people who've been around for 20 years. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Nice suit, by the way, really intimidating." "Marcus, you should have told me." He stood up, needing to move, needing space. "You should have been honest about who you are." Sienna stood too, her hands clenched at her sides. "I did tell you. I told you I work in business development. That's not the same as saying you're rich enough to own buildings and have people running around after you like you're royalty." The anger was fully present now, burning away the embarrassment. "I've been sitting here for weeks telling you about my day labor jobs and stretching groceries, and you've been, what, getting entertainment from how the poor people live?" "That's not fair," Sienna said, her voice rising slightly. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Marcus demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been playing dress down to see how the other half lives, and I'm the idiot who didn't realize I was part of the experiment." "You're not an experiment, you're my friend." Her eyes were bright now, angry or hurt or both. "Owen's friend. Our kids are genuinely friends, and I thought we were building something real here. How can it be real when you weren't honest?" "I was honest about the things that matter." Sienna's voice cracked slightly. "I told you about being a single mom, about struggling with Owen's questions, about all the hard parts of trying to do this alone. That's all true. That's all real. Except the part where you struggle with money, which is kind of a big piece of single parenting." "I didn't say I struggled with money. You assumed that." Marcus stared at her. Because you showed up to a diner in jeans with a hole in them and ordered from the menu like a normal person. You let me think we were the same. We are the same. Sienna stepped closer, her face flushed. In the ways that actually matter. We're both parents trying our best, both dealing with the same fears and hopes for our kids. The money is it's just money. Just money? Marcus laughed again, the sound bitter. Yeah, spoken like someone who has it. You have no idea what it's like to count every dollar, to worry about whether you can afford your kid's field trip, to feel like a failure because you can't buy them new shoes when they need them. You're right. I don't know that, Sienna said quietly, but I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like to worry you're screwing up your kid. I know what it's like to need a friend and not know how to ask for one without it getting weird and complicated. Well, mission accomplished on the weird and complicated part. They stood there, 3 feet apart, but the distance feeling like miles. While on the playground, their children laughed and played, blissfully unaware that the adult world was collapsing around them. I didn't tell you because of this, Sienna said finally, her voice tired. Because I knew the moment you found out about the money, everything would change. You'd start seeing me differently, treating me differently. And I liked that you didn't. I liked that you talked to me like a person, not a bank account or opportunity or a threat. That's not fair, Marcus shot back. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I can handle knowing. Maybe not. But I make choices to protect Owen the same way you make choices to protect Lena. And one of those choices was trying to give him a normal friendship without all the baggage that comes with people knowing about my money. Our kid's friendship is fine. It's us that's the problem. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, frustration and hurt and shame all tangled together. I can't do this, Sienna. I can't sit on a bench with you knowing that you see me as some charity case. I don't see you as a charity case. Then what do you see me as? Because I'm pretty sure you walked right past me on Tuesday without even noticing I existed. Sienna flinched like he'd struck her. I didn't see you. I was in work mode. And I literally didn't see anything except the problem I was trying to solve. It wasn't personal. That's even worse, Marcus said quietly, that you can just not see people, that we're so far below your notice that we disappear. That's not what I meant. She reached for his arm, but he stepped back. Marcus, please, don't do this. Don't throw away something good because of your pride. My pride? The words came out sharp as broken glass. My pride is the only thing I have left, Sienna. It's what gets me up every morning to do work that breaks my back for money that's never enough. It's what keeps me going when I'm scared I'm failing Lena. So yeah, my pride matters, and it's telling me that this, he gestured between them, was a mistake from the start. Tears were sliding down Sienna's face now, and some part of Marcus hated himself for putting them there. But he couldn't stop, couldn't take back the words, couldn't bridge a gap that had always existed but only now become visible. I thought you were different, he continued, quieter now. I thought maybe we could be friends despite everything, but you're not different. You're just better at hiding what you are. And what am I? Sienna's voice was barely a whisper. Someone from a world I don't belong in. Someone who'll eventually realize that slumming it with the working class isn't as fun as it seemed. He turned toward the playground where Lena and Owen were building something elaborate in the sandbox. I should go. The kids are happy, Sienna said desperately. Look at them, Marcus. Look at how happy they are together. Are you really going to take that away because you're embarrassed? It was the exact right argument to stop him, and she knew it. Marcus watched his daughter laugh at something Owen said, watched the easy camaraderie between them, and felt his resolve waver. I don't know, he admitted. I need to think. Okay. Sienna wiped her face with the back of her hand. Okay, think, but don't just disappear. Don't make this decision without at least talking to me first. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he meant it. He called to Lena that it was time to go, and her protest was immediate and loud. But Daddy, we just got here. We haven't even played zombie tag yet. We need to run some errands, baby girl. But now, Lena. The tone of his voice, hard and final, made her face crumple. She said a hasty goodbye to Owen, confusion and hurt written across her features, and trudged to Marcus's side. Owen looked equally baffled, turning to his mother for an explanation she clearly couldn't give. The walk back to the car was silent except for Lena's sniffles. Marcus felt like the worst parent in the world, taking away his daughter's happiness because his own pride was bruised. But he couldn't stay there. Couldn't pretend everything was fine when his entire understanding of the past 6 weeks had been turned inside out. "Daddy, why are we leaving?" Lena asked as he buckled her into her booster seat. "We just are, honey." "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." He kissed her forehead, his heart breaking at the confusion in her eyes. "You were perfect. You're always perfect." "Then why do you look so sad?" "Because sometimes the world isn't fair," he wanted to say. "Because your daddy is a proud fool who can't handle feeling small. Because the friendship we built was based on a lie, even if it was a well-intentioned one." "Just having a tough day," he said instead. "It'll be okay." But as he drove away from Herman Park, watching Lena's silent tears in the rearview mirror, Marcus wasn't sure he believed that. He'd been happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in years. He'd had someone to talk to who understood, someone who made him laugh, someone whose presence had made the weight of single parenthood feel slightly less crushing. And now he'd destroyed it because his ego couldn't handle the truth that he'd always known somewhere deep down, that someone like Sienna would never actually be interested in someone like him as anything more than a temporary diversion. His phone buzzed repeatedly over the next hour, texts from Sienna that he couldn't bring himself to read. He turned it face down on the kitchen counter and tried to focus on making Lena lunch, on being present for his daughter who didn't understand why her world had suddenly shifted. "Can we still see Owen next Saturday?" she asked quietly over grilled cheese. Marcus didn't know how to answer that. "We'll see" felt cruel, but he couldn't promise something he didn't know if he could deliver. "I miss him already," Lena continued, pushing cheese around her plate. "He's my best friend." "I know, baby girl." "Did Miss Sienna do something bad?" "No, nobody did anything bad. Sometimes grown-ups just have disagreements. But you can say sorry and make it better, right? That's what my teacher says. When friends fight, they talk and say sorry, and then they're friends again." If only it were that simple, Marcus thought. If only saying sorry could bridge the canyon between their two worlds, could make him forget the sight of her walking past him like he didn't exist, could restore the easy friendship they'd had before reality intruded. But childhood logic didn't account for class differences and wounded pride and the complicated shame of realizing you'd been performing poverty in front of someone who'd probably spent more on coffee that week than you made in a month. That night, after Lena had finally fallen asleep, still asking questions he couldn't answer, Marcus sat on his mattress and finally looked at his phone. 12 texts from Sienna, ranging from apologetic to angry to simply sad. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." "But I'm not sorry for being your friend. Owen is crying and I don't know what to tell him. You're being unfair and you know it. Please don't shut us out. Lena deserves better than this. We all deserve better than this." The last text had come through 20 minutes ago. "I'm not giving up on us. On this friendship. I don't care how long you need to sulk. I'm not walking away." Marcus stared at the words until they blurred. Part of him wanted to text back, to apologize for overreacting, to admit that maybe his pride was getting in the way of something good. But a larger part, the part that remembered kneeling on that marble floor while she swept past, couldn't make his fingers type the words. He'd been invisible to her on Tuesday, completely beneath her notice. And that was the truth of it, wasn't it? That's what he actually was in her world. A curiosity, an amusement, someone interesting to know in limited doses, but not actually part of her real life. The friendship had been real for him. But for her, it had been a side quest, a way to feel good about herself, a break from her actual existence in boardrooms and power suits. Marcus set his phone down and lay back on his mattress, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that he'd been meaning to fix for 8 months. Tomorrow was Sunday, then Monday, Tuesday, the week stretching ahead with work and bills and all the grinding sameness that had defined his life before Saturdays at Herman Park had given it punctuation. He could go back to that. He'd survived before Sienna and Owen. He'd survive after. Lena would be sad for a while, but kids were resilient. She'd forget, move on, find new friends. Except even as he thought it, Marcus knew it was a lie. He wouldn't forget. Lena wouldn't forget. And somewhere across town, in a home he couldn't imagine, Sienna probably wasn't forgetting either. But knowing something and being able to do anything about it were two different things entirely. So Marcus lay in the dark, his phone silent beside him, and tried to convince himself that walking away had been the right choice, even as every part of him ached with the wrongness of it. 3 weeks crawled by like wounded things, each day heavier than the last. Marcus threw himself into work with the kind of desperation that came from needing the exhaustion, needing his body to hurt enough that it distracted from the ache in his chest. He picked up extra shifts, took jobs that paid less but kept him busy, said yes to anything that meant he wouldn't have time to think about Saturday afternoons or park benches, or the way Sienna's face had looked when he'd walked away. Lena stopped asking about Owen after the first week, but her silence was worse than her questions. She drew pictures at the kitchen table, elaborate crayon masterpieces of stick figures holding hands that she never showed him but left scattered around the apartment like accusations. She ate her meals quietly, did her homework without being asked, went to bed without protest. The joy that had lit her up during those Saturday afternoons had dimmed to something muted and gray. Marcus told himself it was temporary, that she'd bounce back, that kids were resilient and this was just a tough patch. But watching her stare out the window on Saturday mornings, her small face pressed against the glass like she was waiting for something that would never come, made him feel like the worst father in the world. His phone stayed silent. After that first barrage of texts, Sienna had stopped reaching out, and Marcus told himself he was relieved. It was better this way. A clean break, no drawn-out goodbyes, no awkward attempts to stay friends when the foundation had been built on misunderstanding. But late at night, when sleep wouldn't come and the apartment was too quiet, he'd scroll through their old text thread, reading conversations that had felt so easy and natural and wondering how something so good had gone so wrong so fast. Work became his refuge and his punishment. He took a job cleaning out a foreclosed house in the suburbs, hauling away the detritus of someone else's failed dreams. He worked construction cleanup downtown, breathing in dust and carrying loads that made his back scream. He did warehouse inventory overnight, counting boxes until the numbers blurred together, and he could almost forget what day it was. But Thursdays were the worst. Every Thursday evening, driving past the exit for Rosie's Diner, Marcus would feel the pull of habit and memory. He'd remember Owen's French fry tower and Lena's shy smile and Sienna's warmth cutting through his defensive walls. He'd remember feeling like maybe he wasn't alone in this impossible task of single parenthood, like maybe there were people who could understand without judgment or pity. On the fourth Thursday, he almost took the exit. His hands actually turned the wheel before his pride reasserted itself, and he jerked back into his lane, earning an angry horn from the car behind him. He drove home with white knuckles and a jaw clenched so tight it ached, and made Lena mac and cheese from a box while she watched him with those too perceptive eyes that saw everything he was trying to hide. "Daddy, are you mad at Miss Sienna?" she asked during dinner, breaking the silence that had become their new normal. "No, baby girl, I'm not mad." "Then why don't we see them anymore?" "How did you explain adult complications to a 7-year-old? How did you say that sometimes pride mattered more than happiness? That embarrassment could poison something good? That the world was divided into people who belonged together and people who just borrowed each other's time for a while?" "Sometimes friendships don't work out," Marcus said carefully. "It's nobody's fault. It just happens." "That's stupid," Lena announced with the blunt honesty of childhood. "You should fix it." "It's not that simple." "Why not? You always tell me that if something's broken, you try to fix it. You fixed my bike when the chain came off. You fixed the wobbly table leg. You fixed my stuffed elephant when his ear was coming off." She counted these miracles on her small fingers. "So why can't you fix this?" "Because some things aren't fixable with duct tape and determination, sweetheart." Lena studied him for a long moment, then returned to her mac and cheese with a disappointed sigh that somehow hurt more than tears would have. Marcus finished his own dinner without tasting it, the food turning to ash in his mouth. That night, after Lena was asleep, Marcus found himself holding his phone, thumb hovering over Sienna's contact. He could text her. He could apologize for overreacting, for letting his pride destroy something good, for hurting their kids because his ego was bruised. The words formed in his head. "I'm sorry. I miss our Saturdays. Can we try again?" But then he remembered the marble lobby and her confident stride and the way she'd walked past him like he was part of the furniture. He remembered counting dollars for a grilled cheese while she made decisions about millions. He remembered the fundamental truth that their friendship had revealed. They lived in different worlds, and crossing between them required one person to pretend they belonged somewhere they didn't. He set the phone down without texting. Friday morning arrived with rain, the kind of cold November drizzle that Houston occasionally produced to remind people that seasons existed. Marcus had a job scheduled at a corporate office building, post-construction cleanup that would take most of the day. The pay was decent enough that he couldn't turn it down, even though every muscle in his body ached from the week's accumulated labor. The building was new, all glass and steel and modern architecture that screamed money and progress. Marcus and his crew arrived at 7 a.m., ready to spend hours sweeping up drywall dust and construction debris, making the space pristine for whatever company would move in. The site supervisor, a harried woman with a clipboard and a perpetual frown, directed them to start on the 15th floor and work their way down. It was mindless work, the kind Marcus had learned to appreciate. Sweep, bag, haul, repeat. His body moved on autopilot while his mind drifted through the usual circuits of worry. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Lena needed new shoes. The car was making that noise again. He should probably look for something more stable than day labor, but stable jobs required availability he couldn't guarantee with Lena's school schedule. Around noon, the site supervisor called them down to the lobby. Valcor executives are doing a walkthrough. Need you all to clear the upper floors for an hour. Stay out of sight down here. Marcus froze at the name. Valcor. He'd heard Sienna mention Henderson contracts on that terrible Tuesday, but he'd never made the connection to a company name. Now, hearing it from the supervisor's mouth, pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Valcor Industries. He'd seen the name on buildings around Houston, on business news, on the kind of coverage that suggested major corporate power. "What's Valcor?" one of his coworkers asked. "Tech and development conglomerate," the supervisor replied, checking her clipboard. "They're the new tenants for floors 12 through 20. Big deal, apparently. The CEO's coming herself to inspect before they sign the final lease." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. No, this couldn't be happening. Not again. Not another collision between his world and hers in a space where he was invisible and irrelevant. "Can we take an early lunch?" he asked the supervisor, his voice tight. "Come back after they're done?" She shrugged. "Long as you finish the job by 6. Don't care when you eat." Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed for the exit, moving fast enough that his crew called after him, asking if he was okay. He wasn't okay. He was the opposite of okay. The universe seemed determined to rub his face in the distance between his life and Sienna's, to make sure he never forgot which side of the invisible divide he belonged on. He made it to the parking garage before he heard the voices. The executive entrance opened onto the same level where the crew had parked their beat-up trucks and vans, and there was no other exit without walking directly past them. Marcus pressed himself against a concrete pillar, hidden in shadow, and tried to become invisible through sheer force of will. "The space is perfect," a male voice was saying. "The light on the upper floors, the sight lines, it's exactly what we need for the new innovation hub. I'm more concerned about the timeline." That was Sienna's voice, crisp and professional, and utterly unlike the warm tones he'd gotten used to on park benches. "We can't afford delays. The Seattle office is already 6 months behind schedule, and if Houston follows the same pattern, we're looking at serious budget overruns." Marcus risked a glance around the pillar. She was there in another expensive suit, navy this time, surrounded by what looked like a dozen people in business attire. Her hair was up in that severe style again, and she carried herself with the kind of authority that made everyone else unconsciously lean toward her when she spoke. "We've built in buffer time," a woman with red hair assured her. "The contractors understand the penalties for late delivery." "Good, because I'm not interested in excuses. I want results." Sienna paused near a sleek black car, turning to address the group. "This Houston expansion is crucial. We're making a statement about Valcor's commitment to Texas markets. Everything needs to be perfect. The space, the timeline, the optics. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives followed her statement. Then someone asked about the budget for office furniture, and they moved into a discussion of numbers that made Marcus's head spin. Hundreds of thousands for chairs and desks, casual mentions of million-dollar build-outs, conversations about resources that existed in a realm so far from his own experience that they might as well have been discussing space travel. This was her world. This was who she actually was. Not the woman in jeans getting ice cream with her son, but this person making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. The Sienna he'd known had been the costume, the weekend hobby. This was the truth. Marcus waited until they'd moved toward the elevators before he slipped out of the parking garage and into the rain. He walked 3 blocks before he realized he had nowhere to go, no destination in mind except away. His phone buzzed, probably the supervisor wondering where he'd gone, but he ignored it. He couldn't go back to that building, couldn't spend the afternoon cleaning floors in a space that would become part of her empire. He found himself at a bus stop, sitting on a wet bench in the rain, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. He missed her. God, he missed her so much it physically hurt. He missed their conversations and her laugh and the way she'd made him feel seen and valued. He missed having someone who understood the specific challenges of solo parenting, who didn't judge his circumstances or offer hollow platitudes about things getting better. But more than missing her, he hated himself for missing her. Because what he'd been missing was a version of her that didn't fully exist, the casual, accessible Sienna who met him at parks and diners, not the CEO Sienna who controlled budgets bigger than he could conceptualize. He'd fallen for an illusion, and now he was grieving something that had never been real. His phone rang. The supervisor, definitely. Marcus let it go to voicemail, then texted that he had a family emergency and couldn't finish the shift. It would cost him the day's pay and probably get him dropped from future jobs with this crew, but he couldn't make himself care. Some prices were worth paying to preserve what little dignity he had left. The rain soaked through his jacket as he sat there, watching cars pass and people hurry by under umbrellas. Everyone had somewhere to be, some purpose driving them forward. Marcus felt untethered, like he'd lost the plot of his own life somewhere between that first Thursday at Rosie's Diner and this miserable Friday huddled at a bus stop. His phone buzzed again. Not the supervisor this time. A text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Sienna. Please call me. We need to talk." His hands started shaking. She'd texted from a different number, which meant this wasn't casual. This was deliberate, determined. Part of him wanted to delete it immediately, to maintain the walls he'd built back up over the past 3 weeks. But a larger part, the part that had spent 21 days missing her voice, couldn't quite make his thumb press delete. A second text followed. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But Owen misses Lena and I miss you, and we need to figure this out, please." Then a third. "I'm not giving up on this friendship, Marcus. I meant what I said. I don't care how long it takes." Marcus stared at the messages until the screen blurred. The rain had plastered his hair to his forehead and water was dripping down the back of his neck. But he couldn't move. Couldn't decide what to do with these words that felt both like a lifeline and a trap. A car pulled up to the curb in front of the bus stop. A modest sedan, not the sleek black luxury car from the parking garage. The window rolled down, and there she was. Sienna, in her navy suit with rain spotting the shoulders, her severe hairstyle coming slightly undone in the humidity, looking at him with an expression that held no trace of the CEO confidence he'd witnessed 30 minutes ago. "Get in," she said quietly. "How did you—" "I saw you. In the parking garage. I saw you leave." She leaned across to open the passenger door. "Please, Marcus, get in the car. You're soaking wet." He should walk away. He should tell her to leave him alone, that they'd said everything that needed saying at Herman Park 3 weeks ago, but his body moved without consulting his brain, folding itself into the warm, dry interior of her car, because apparently even his muscles knew he was tired of fighting. Sienna didn't speak immediately. She turned up the heat and put the car in drive, pulling away from the curb and merging into traffic with the kind of competent ease that suggested she did everything well. They drove in silence for several minutes before she pulled into a parking lot, the public library, Marcus realized, the one where he brought Lena every week. She turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. For a long moment, they just sat there, the rain drumming on the roof, the windows beginning to fog from their breathing.
I'm sorry, Sienna said finally. I should have told you. From the beginning, I should have been honest about who I am and what I do. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. Marcus kept his eyes forward, watching rain streak down the windshield. Why didn't you? Because I'm a coward, she replied, her voice raw in a way he'd never heard before. Because I've spent the last 5 years having every interaction colored by my money. People either want something from me, or they're intimidated by me, or they're performing for me. And when I met you and you just treated me like a person, like a mom at a diner who made a decent call on inviting your family to share some fries, I wanted to keep that. I wanted to be just Sienna for a while, not Sienna Vale, CEO of Vale Core Industries. That's not fair to me, though, Marcus said quietly. You made that choice for both of us. I know, you're absolutely right. She turned to look at him, and in the gray light filtering through the rain-streaked windows, she looked younger, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. But can I tell you something? Can I be completely honest now, even if it's too late? Go ahead. That first night at the diner when Owen pointed out that Lena was hungry, my first instinct was to have my assistant send over a check to some food bank and call it good. That's what I usually do, throw money at problems and feel like I've done something meaningful. Her voice cracked slightly. But Owen didn't want to donate money. He wanted to share his fries.
And I realized my son had more emotional intelligence at 5 than I'd managed to develop in 33 years. Marcus found himself listening despite his best intentions to stay angry. So we sat with you, Sienna continued, and it was the first real conversation I'd had in months, maybe years. You talked to me like an equal, not like a networking opportunity or a potential investor or someone whose favor you needed to curry. You were just yourself, honest and funny and struggling with the same things I struggle with. And I thought, this is what I've been missing. This is what real friendship feels like. But it wasn't real, Marcus interjected. It was based on you hiding who you are. I hid the money, Sienna corrected. I didn't hide who I am. Everything else was real, Marcus. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment of connection, that was me. The real me. Not the CEO version that walks through lobbies barking orders, but the actual person underneath all the corporate bullshit. She reached toward him, then seemed to think better of it, and pulled her hand back. And I know it's not the same for you. I know that you had no choice but to be completely yourself because you didn't have the luxury of hiding behind anything. And that's not fair, and I'm sorry. But please don't tell me that our friendship wasn't real just because I have money. That dismisses everything we built. Marcus felt his anger warring with the part of him that had missed her desperately for 3 weeks. You walked right past me. Twice now. You've walked past me like I'm invisible. I know, Sienna said, and now there were tears on her face. I know, and that kills me. But Marcus, I wasn't seeing anyone. When I'm in work mode, I have tunnel vision. I'm so focused on whatever problem I'm trying to solve that I literally don't see anything else. It's not about you being invisible. It's about me being blind to everything except the immediate crisis. That doesn't make it better. No, it doesn't, she agreed. But it's the truth. And if you'd been wearing a suit in that lobby, if you'd been one of my executives, I probably would have walked past you too. I'm not proud of that. I'm not defending it. I'm just asking you to understand that it wasn't personal. Everything's personal when it's about how you see people, Marcus replied, or don't see them. They sat in silence again, the rain intensifying into a proper downpour that turned the world outside the car into a blur of gray. Marcus felt exhausted from the rain and the emotional whiplash and 3 weeks of trying to pretend he was fine when he was anything but. I saw you today, Sienna said softly, in the parking garage, and I knew you were hiding from me, and I knew I should probably just let you go. But I couldn't, Marcus. I've spent 3 weeks respecting your space and hoping you'd reach out, and when I saw you today, I thought maybe the universe was giving me one more chance to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Marcus said, but the words lacked conviction. We're from different worlds. That's just reality. Bullshit, Sienna replied with sudden intensity. That's your pride talking, and you know it. Yes, I have money, and you don't. Yes, there's a power imbalance, and that's uncomfortable. But Owen and Lena don't care about any of that. They're best friends, and we're keeping them apart because of adult hang-ups that have nothing to do with them. This isn't about the kids, isn't it? She turned to face him fully now. Because from where I'm sitting, two parents are so wrapped up in their own issues that they're hurting their children. Lena deserves her friend back. Owen deserves his. And maybe, if we could get past our pride and fear and all the complicated feelings about class and money, we deserve each other's friendship too. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his righteous anger, but he was so tired of being angry. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. I don't know if I can be friends with someone whose world is so different from mine. My world isn't that different, Sienna insisted. I parent alone. I worry about screwing up my kid. I get lonely and scared and overwhelmed. The money just means I have different problems, not no problems. Different problems is an understatement. Okay, yes, I'm not worried about making rent or affording groceries. You're right. She took a shaky breath. But I worry about raising a son who understands privilege without becoming entitled. I worry about him never learning empathy because everything's always been easy. I worry that the money will insulate him from reality until he becomes the kind of person who walks past someone scrubbing floors without seeing them. Marcus felt something shift in his chest at that admission. That's why I wanted him to be friends with Lena, Sienna continued, her voice breaking. Because she's good and kind and knows what it means to work for things. Because you're teaching her compassion and resilience despite circumstances that would break most people. And I thought maybe, if Owen could learn from both of us, he'd become someone I could actually be proud of. He's already someone to be proud of, Marcus said quietly. He shared his fries without being asked. He invited Lena to play without seeing her too small jacket or noticing that her shoes were from Payless. That's all you, Sienna? You're doing something right. We were doing something right, she corrected. Together. They brought out the best in each other. Yeah, Marcus agreed, feeling his walls crumbling. They did. So what do we do? Sienna asked, and the vulnerability in the question undid him completely. Because I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you and Lena from our lives, but I also can't change who I am or what I do. The money isn't going anywhere, and neither is the power imbalance. If that's too much for you, I'll understand. But I need to know. Marcus sat with the question, really sat with it, letting himself feel the tangle of pride and hurt and longing that had defined the past 3 weeks. He thought about Lena's dimmed joy and her sad drawings of stick figures holding hands. He thought about the version of himself that had existed during those Saturday afternoons. Happier, lighter, less alone in the impossible task of raising a child solo. He thought about Sienna's laugh and their easy conversations and the way she'd made him feel seen and valued for the first time in years. I was embarrassed, he said finally, seeing you in that lobby so powerful and competent while I was on my knees scrubbing floors. It made me feel small, and I hated feeling that way, and I took it out on you. You're not small, Sienna said fiercely. You're a man raising his daughter alone, working whatever jobs you can find to make ends meet, never complaining, never asking for help. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Marcus. The money doesn't change that. It changes how people see me, though. Not me. Not the parts of me that matter. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. Please, can we try again? Can we figure out how to be friends despite the complicated stuff? Marcus looked at their joined hands, hers soft from expensive moisturizer and weekly manicures, his calloused and scarred from years of hard labor. Such different hands, connected by a grip that felt solid and real and right. Lena needs her friend back, he said slowly. Owen too. And I... He swallowed hard, forcing himself to admit what he'd been denying for 3 weeks. I miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss having someone who gets it. I miss you too, Sienna said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. So much. These past 3 weeks have been miserable. Yeah, they really have, Marcus agreed. They sat there in the library parking lot, rain pounding on the roof, still holding hands across the center console of Sienna's car. It felt like the world had stopped to give them this moment, this chance to choose friendship over pride, connection over fear. Ground rules, Ma, Marcus said finally. If we're going to do this, we need rules. Okay, like what? No more secrets. If something's bothering you or me, we talk about it. We don't let it fester.
Agreed, Sienna said immediately. And I need you to see me. When we're together, I need you to actually be present, not in work mode or CEO mode or whatever, just you. I can do that. I promise. She squeezed his hand. What else? I buy Lena's ice cream, Marcus said, the words coming out more forcefully than he'd intended. I know it's stupid. I know the money doesn't matter to you, but it matters to me. Let me have that. Of course, Sienna replied softly. Marcus, I never wanted to take that from you. I like treating people I care about, but I hear you. Lena's your daughter. You provide for her. Thank you. Do you have more rules? She asked. Probably, but I can't think of them right now. I'm too tired and too wet and too relieved that we're talking again. Sienna laughed, the real laugh, not the polished CEO version, and Marcus felt something in his chest finally relax. Should we tell the kids? She asked. Owen's been asking every single day when he'll see Lena again. I've run out of excuses. Lena, too. She thinks I'm being stupid and should just fix it. She's not wrong, Sienna said with a small smile.
Marcus smiled back, tentative
but real. No, she's really not.
They made plans to meet at the park the next day. Saturday, their day. The rhythm they'd established before Pride had derailed everything. Sienna promised to bring Owen by noon. Marcus promised to bring the frisbee Owen had wanted to learn to throw. They let go of each other's hands reluctantly, and Marcus opened the car door, ready to face the rain again. Marcus, Sienna called as he started to get out. He turned back. Yeah? Thank you. For giving us another chance, for not letting my mistakes destroy something good. Thank you for showing up, he replied, for not taking the easy way out and just letting me go. Never, Sienna said with quiet intensity. I told you I wasn't giving up on this friendship. I meant it. Marcus nodded, too emotional to speak, and headed into the rain. It felt different now, less punishing, more cleansing, like the world was washing away the accumulated hurt of 3 weeks and giving them all a chance to start fresh. That night, when Lena asked her usual question about whether they'd see Owen, Marcus finally had a different answer. Tomorrow, he said, watching his daughter's face transform with joy. We're meeting them at the park tomorrow. Lena's shriek of happiness brought banging from the neighbor upstairs, but Marcus didn't care. His daughter was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in 3 weeks, and that was worth any amount of noise complaints. Really? She demanded, grabbing his arms. Really, really, really? Really, 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 Marcus confirmed, pulling her into a hug. I'm sorry it took so long, baby girl. Sometimes daddies are stupid and have to learn to say sorry and fix things. You fixed it! Lena pulled back to look at him with shining eyes. I knew you would. You always fix things. Not always, Marcus said honestly, but I try. And Miss Sienna helped. She didn't give up on us. She's nice, Lena announced with the certainty of childhood. I like her. Can we be friends with them forever? Forever was a long time, and Marcus had learned to be cautious about promises he couldn't guarantee. But looking at his daughter's radiant face, thinking about Sienna's determination and the way her hand had felt in his, he found himself willing to hope. We can try, he said. That's all any of us can do. Try our best and hope it's enough. It will be, Lena said confidently, because we're good at being friends. And maybe she was right. Maybe the trying was what mattered, not the guarantees. Maybe friendship between different worlds was possible if both people cared enough to bridge the gap, to see past the surface differences to the shared humanity underneath. Marcus went to bed that night still tired, still worried about rent and shoes and car repairs, but lighter somehow. The weight that had been crushing his chest for 3 weeks had lifted, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to hope. Tomorrow, they'd go back to Herman Park. The kids would play and laugh and pick up exactly where they'd left off, because kids were better at forgiveness than adults would ever be. And he and Sienna would sit on their bench and figure out how to build a friendship strong enough to survive the complications of reality. It wouldn't be easy. The money would still create awkward moments, and his pride would still flare up sometimes, and they'd have to navigate 1,000 small tensions that came with their different circumstances. But maybe it would be worth it. Maybe some things were worth the work of fighting past your own hang-ups to claim something real. Marcus fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about Saturday afternoons, About the possibility that sometimes good things lasted not because they were easy, but because people decided they were worth protecting. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only December in Houston could produce. Cool enough for jackets, but warm enough that the sun felt like a blessing instead of a burden. Lena was up before dawn, already dressed in her best outfit, the purple unicorn shirt and her least worn jeans, bouncing around the apartment with so much energy that Marcus half expected her to literally vibrate through the walls. "Is it time yet?" she asked for the 14th time, peering at the kitchen clock like she could make the hands move faster through sheer force of will. "Baby girl, it's 7:30. We're not meeting them until noon." Marcus poured coffee into his chipped mug, trying to caffeinate himself into something resembling parental competence. "That's 4.5 more hours. That's forever." Lena collapsed dramatically onto the couch. "I'm going to die of waiting." "You're not going to die. You're going to eat breakfast and maybe watch some cartoons and definitely calm down before you make yourself sick with excitement." But Marcus understood the feeling. He'd been awake since 5, his own anticipation mixed with nervousness about whether they could really rebuild what had broken. 3 weeks apart felt like a lifetime in the language of new friendship, and he wasn't sure if they'd be able to recapture the easy rhythm they'd found before pride and circumstances had shattered everything. The hours crawled by with Lena asking approximately every 8 minutes if it was time to leave yet. Marcus cleaned the apartment twice, took a longer shower than their water heater probably appreciated, and changed his shirt 3 times before settling on the same flannel he'd worn to the park a dozen times before. No point in pretending to be anything other than exactly what he was. At 11:45, Lena was standing by the door with her shoes already on, jacket zipped, looking at him with such desperate impatience that Marcus couldn't help but laugh. Okay, let's go before you explode." The drive to Herman Park felt significant in a way previous trips hadn't, like they were traveling not just across Houston, but across some invisible boundary between before and after. The park looked the same as always when they arrived. Families scattered across the grass, joggers circling the paths, the playground alive with the sound of children's laughter. But Marcus felt different walking toward their bench, hyper-aware of every step, every breath, every beat of his heart that seemed too loud in his chest. They were early. Of course they were early. Lena had practically dragged him out the door, and the bench sat empty, waiting. Marcus checked his phone. 11:52. Sienna had said noon. 8 more minutes.
"What if they don't come?" Lena asked quietly, the first hint of doubt creeping into her excitement. "They'll come, sweetheart," Miss Sienna promised. "But what if—" "Fry girl!" The shout came from across the playground, and there was Owen breaking away from his mother's hand and running full tilt toward them with the kind of joyful abandon that only children could manage. "Fry girl, you're here!" Lena's face split into a smile so wide it looked like it might hurt, and then she was running too, and the 2 kids collided in the middle of the playground with a hug that nearly knocked them both over. They were talking over each other, a rapid-fire exchange of "I missed you," and "Where were you?" and "Can we play zombie tag now?" that blended into one continuous stream of happiness. Marcus looked up, and there was Sienna, walking toward him with careful steps, like she wasn't quite sure of her welcome despite yesterday's conversation. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair down and slightly messy from the wind, and she looked nervous in a way that made Marcus's own anxiety ease slightly. She was scared too. They were both scared, both hoping this would work. "Hi," she said when she reached the bench, staying standing, not quite ready to sit. "Hi," Marcus replied, standing too because it felt wrong to remain seated while she hovered. "You came." "Of course I came. I said I would." She smiled tentatively. "You okay?" "Terrified, actually," he admitted. "But in a good way? Maybe? I don't know. This is weird." "So weird," Sienna agreed, and then they both laughed, the tension breaking like a thread pulled too tight, finally snapping into relief. "Can I sit?" "Please. This is your bench, too." They sat with a careful foot of space between them, watching their children rediscover each other with the easy forgiveness of youth. Owen was showing Lena something, a Pokemon card, Marcus realized, and Lena was responding with appropriate enthusiasm, even though Marcus knew she didn't really understand the game. Friends supported each other's interests even when they didn't share them. That was one of life's early lessons, learned here on this playground. I was worried you wouldn't come, Sienna said quietly, that you'd changed your mind overnight. I could say the same thing, Marcus replied. Thought maybe in the cold light of day, you'd realize being friends with a guy who cleans buildings for a living wasn't worth the trouble. Marcus, she turned to look at him directly. Can we make a deal, right here, right now? What kind of deal? That we stop with the self-deprecating stuff. You don't diminish yourself because of what you do for work, and I don't apologize for having money. We just accept that those are facts of our lives, not judgments about our worth as people. Marcus considered this. It went against every defensive instinct he'd developed, every protective wall he'd built to shield himself from judgment. But maybe that was the point. Maybe friendship required vulnerability, required choosing to believe the best about someone instead of assuming the worst. Okay, he said finally. Deal. Though you're asking me to break a pretty deeply ingrained habit. Same. I've spent 5 years either hiding my money or wielding it like a weapon. Being normal about it feels impossible. She smiled ruefully. We're both going to mess this up sometimes, aren't we? Probably constantly, Marcus agreed. But maybe if we keep talking about it, keep being honest, we'll figure it out eventually. Eventually sounds good. I can work with eventually. They fell into silence, but it was the comfortable kind they'd had before. The silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. The kids had moved to the swings, Lena pushing Owen with fierce determination while he shrieked with laughter. Other families moved around them, living their own Saturday afternoon stories, oblivious to the small miracle of reconciliation happening on this particular bench. Owen's been different these past 3 weeks, Sienna said after a while. Quieter, less happy. He asked me why some friendships end, and I didn't know what to tell him. Lena, too. She stopped talking about her day at school, stopped drawing pictures, just kind of dimmed, like someone had turned down her brightness. Marcus swallowed hard. I hated that I did that to her, that my pride mattered more than her happiness. We both made mistakes, Sienna said. I should have been honest from the start, and you should have given me a chance to explain instead of shutting down completely. We're both culpable here. Look at us, being mature and taking responsibility, Marcus said with a slight smile. Very adult of us. Extremely adult. I'm very proud of our emotional growth. They watched the kids for another moment. Then Sienna said, Can I ask you something? And you can tell me to mind my own business if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. The job at the construction site, the one where you saw me on Tuesday, you left before finishing, didn't you? The supervisor called my office trying to track you down for something about the final payment. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. Yeah, I told them I had a family emergency. Probably burned that bridge for future work. Because you didn't want to be in the same building as me. Because I couldn't handle it, he corrected. Being in your world, seeing what you actually are versus who I thought you were. It felt like too much. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What if I could help with that? Help with what? The work situation. You're clearly good at what you do. The supervisor was annoyed you left, but said you were one of the best workers they'd had. And Vailcor is always looking for facility management people, especially people we can trust. Marcus felt his spine stiffen. I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's a job offer. We have 3 buildings in Houston that need maintenance staff. Regular hours, benefits, decent pay. You'd report to the facility manager, not to me. I'd have nothing to do with your employment beyond putting your name in the system. She held up her hand when he started to protest. Before you say no, just think about it. Think about what regular hours and health insurance would mean for Lena. Think about whether your pride is more important than stability. That's not fair, Marcus said, but the words lacked heat. I know, but someone needs to say it. Sienna's voice was gentle but firm. You're working yourself to death doing day labor that destroys your body and barely pays enough to scrape by. And I have the ability to offer you something better, not as charity, not as pity, but because you're qualified and I trust you. Is it really pride if you say no, or is it just stubbornness? Marcus wanted to argue.
wanted to defend his right to refuse help, wanted to maintain the independence that had defined his identity for 6 years. But he thought about Lena needing new shoes and his car making concerning noises and the constant anxiety about whether this month's bills would get paid on time. He thought about health insurance and regular hours and not having to hustle for every job. What would the job actually be? He asked carefully. Maintenance and facilities management, fixing things that break, coordinating with contractors for bigger repairs, making sure the buildings run smoothly. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. 40 hours a week, benefits kick in after 90 days, pay starts at $42,000 a year with raises based on performance. $42,000. That was more than Marcus had made in any single year since Lena's mother died. That was enough to move to a better apartment, to buy Lena new clothes when she needed them instead of waiting for sales, to stop counting every dollar and maybe start breathing a little easier. I need to think about it, he said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. The position's not going anywhere. Sienna paused, then added, But Marcus? This isn't me trying to save you or fix you or whatever. This is me recognizing that you're good at what you do, and I happen to have a need for exactly that skill set. That's how jobs work. I'm not doing you a favor. You'd be doing me one by taking a position I need filled with someone I know is reliable. You barely know me, Marcus pointed out. I know you've shown up every single Saturday for 6 weeks straight. I know you put your daughter first in every decision. I know you work your ass off and never complain. That tells me everything I need to know about reliability. She met his eyes. But like I said, think about it. No pressure. The conversation felt too heavy for a sunny Saturday afternoon, so Marcus deliberately changed the subject. Did Owen really tell his class that Lena was his best friend? Sienna's face softened into a genuine smile. He did. The teacher sent home a note saying she was glad he'd found a special friend because he'd been struggling with connections this year. Most kids either treat him differently when they find out about the money, or their parents push them to be his friend for the wrong reasons. That's awful. It's life when you're rich, Sienna said matter-of-factly. Everything's complicated by ulterior motives. That's why Lena is so important to him. She liked him before she knew anything about me or what I do. It's pure, uncomplicated, real. Lena doesn't know about the money? Marcus asked, surprised. Not really. She knows Owen lives in a big house. We had a play date there once before. Everything. But she didn't make the connection to wealth. She just thought he had a lot of space for toys. Sienna smiled. Which I guess is technically true. The mention of a play date sparked something in Marcus's mind. Speaking of which, Lena's been asking if Owen could come over to our place. And I've been avoiding the question because our apartment is small and kind of run down and not exactly the kind of place I imagine Owen is used to. He lives in a penthouse. He's not used to any kind of normal, Sienna said dryly. Honestly, going to a regular apartment where the bathroom door actually closes and you can hear the neighbors might be good for him. Give him some perspective. Marcus laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, I guess we could manage a play date. Though I should warn you, we have exactly 3 rooms, one of which is barely bigger than a closet. Your whole place is probably our apartment times 10. I don't care about that, Sienna said firmly. And neither will Owen. He just wants to play with his friend. They made plans tentatively. Maybe next weekend, Saturday afternoon after the park. Just a couple hours so Owen could see Lena's room and they could play without the structure of playground equipment. It felt significant somehow. This willingness to let Sienna into his actual life instead of just the neutral territory of public parks. A test of whether their friendship could survive reality, not just the carefully curated version they'd been performing. The afternoon stretched on in the golden way December afternoons do, the light slanting through the trees at that perfect angle that made everything look slightly magical. The kids played with the intensity of children making up for lost time, moving from the swings to the jungle gym to an elaborate game involving sticks and rocks that had some kind of rules Marcus couldn't begin to parse. He and Sienna talked about easier things, about Owen's obsession with space and Lena's latest library book selections, about the weird politics of school pickup lines and the challenge of explaining death to children who asked why everyone couldn't just live forever. They talked about everything and nothing, rebuilding the comfortable rapport that had been the foundation of their friendship before pride and circumstances had complicated things. Around 3 o'clock, Owen came running over, Lena right behind him. "Mom, can we get ice cream? Please, please, please." "Please, Daddy," Lena added her voice to the chorus. "We've been so good." Marcus looked at Sienna, and something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the new rules they'd established, of boundaries and respect, and navigating this carefully. She raised her eyebrows slightly, asking permission without words. "Ice cream sounds good," Marcus said. "My treat this time." "You sure?" Sienna asked quietly. "I'm sure. I got paid yesterday, and we're celebrating friendship and second chances. I think that calls for ice cream." They walked to the shop together, the four of them falling naturally into the formation they'd established before. Kids in front, adults behind, close enough to supervise but far enough to let them have their own conversation. Marcus felt hyper-aware of Sienna walking beside him, of the comfortable silence between them that didn't need filling, of the way this all felt both new and familiar at the same time. At the ice cream shop, Marcus paid for all 4 cones, letting Lena get the large instead of the small, splurging slightly because sometimes you needed to mark occasions with small extravagances. Sienna didn't protest, just smiled her thanks and steered Owen toward a table outside where they could eat in the sunshine. "This is the best day ever," Lena announced through a mouthful of strawberry ice cream. "Even better than my birthday." "Same," Owen agreed. "I missed you so much, Fry Girl." "I missed you too, Tower Boy." Marcus met Sienna's eyes over the kids' heads, and he saw his own emotion reflected there, relief and gratitude, and the tentative hope that maybe they'd actually figured this out. Maybe they could make this work despite all the complications. As they were finishing their ice cream, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his heart sank. His landlord. That was never good news. "I should take this," he said apologetically, stepping away from the table. "Give me a minute." The conversation was brief and devastating. The building was being sold. The new owners wanted to renovate. All current tenants needed to be out by the end of January. 6 weeks to find a new place in a city where rents had been climbing steadily, where his credit score and income made him a risky tenant, where most landlords wanted first month, last month, and a security deposit he didn't have saved. He returned to the table feeling like someone had punched him in the stomach, trying to keep his face neutral so Lena wouldn't pick up on his panic. But Sienna saw it immediately, her eyes narrowing with concern as he sat back down. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, fine. Just landlord stuff." He forced a smile for Lena's benefit. "Nothing to worry about, baby girl." But Sienna's expression said she wasn't buying it, and later, after the kids had run off to play on the small playground adjacent to the ice cream shop, she pressed, "What's actually going on?" Marcus hesitated, pride warring with the exhaustion of carrying everything alone. They just rebuilt this friendship, just established rules about honesty and communication, and she'd asked him to be real with her, to let down the walls. "Building's being sold," he said finally, keeping his voice low so Lena wouldn't hear. "We have to be out by end of January. 6 weeks to find a new place in a market I can barely afford as it is." "Shit," Sienna breathed. "Marcus, I'm sorry. That's awful timing." "Timing is what it is. I'll figure it out. I always do." But even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. He didn't know how he'd figure this out. Every apartment he could potentially afford was in worse neighborhoods than where they currently lived, and the better areas were completely out of reach unless he wanted to spend 70% of his income on rent. Sienna was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. Then she said carefully, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I might be able to help." "Sienna, just hear me out," she interrupted. "I own a few rental properties around the city, small places, nothing fancy. One of them, a 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood near Lena's school, just came vacant. The previous tenant moved out last month, and I've been dragging my feet on listing it because the property manager keeps pushing me to renovate and jack up the rent. But honestly, I'd rather have a reliable tenant who'll take care of the place." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I can't afford market rate in a decent neighborhood. You know I can't." "I'm not asking market rate. I'm asking whatever you're paying now. Maybe less if your current place is overpriced, which I'm guessing it might be." She held up her hand before he could protest. "This isn't charity. This is me being a landlord and you being a tenant. You'll pay rent, you'll sign a lease, everything will be completely above board and legal. I just happen to value reliability over profit, and I know you'll take care of the place. You can't just give me a discount because we're friends. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes this complicated. I'm not giving you a discount because we're friends, Sienna said firmly. I'm offering you fair rent because you're a stable tenant with a kid who'll be careful with the property. I could list it tomorrow and probably get some tech bro who'll trash the place and skip out on rent after 3 months. Or I could rent it to someone I trust who has an actual incentive to maintain it. This is good business, Marcus, not charity. It feels like charity. Then let's make it not charity. Let's draw up a proper lease, put everything in writing, establish that this is a standard landlord-tenant relationship. You have a problem with the plumbing, you call the property manager, not me. I need the rent by the 1st of the month, or there are late fees. Everything professional and by the book. Marcus wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to maintain his independence, wanted to prove he could handle his own problems. But he thought about Lena and 6 weeks to find housing and the very real possibility that they'd end up somewhere worse than where they were. He thought about regular hours and health insurance and the job offer Sienna had made earlier. He thought about whether pride was worth more than stability, worth more than giving his daughter a safe home in a decent neighborhood. Can I see it? He asked finally. Before I decide? Of course. We could go tomorrow if you want. Bring Lena, let her see the place. Make sure it's somewhere you'd actually want to live. Okay, Marcus said slowly. Okay, yeah, tomorrow works. They exchanged a look that acknowledged all the complicated feelings swirling around this conversation. Marcus's reluctance to accept help, Sienna's desire to provide it, the delicate balance they were trying to strike between friendship and financial inequality. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't simple. But maybe that was okay. Maybe real friendship wasn't supposed to be easy. The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of children's laughter and easy conversation. By the time they parted ways at 5 o'clock, promises to meet at the apartment tomorrow at noon, pinky swears between the kids that next Saturday they'd play zombie tag for real, Marcus felt emotionally wrung out but cautiously hopeful. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzly, but Lena's excitement was undimmed. Are we really going to see a new house, Daddy? Just looking, baby girl. No promises. But when Sienna texted him the address and he plugged it into his phone, Marcus felt his cautious hope grow slightly. The neighborhood was good. Not fancy, but safe and clean, with actual trees lining the streets. 10 minutes from Lena's school, close to a library and a park that wasn't Herman, but looked decent in the satellite view. They arrived 5 minutes early. Marcus's perpetual punctuality was apparently uncurable, and found Sienna already waiting outside a small duplex with blue shutters and a tiny front yard. The building was old but well-maintained, the kind of place that had character without being run down. This is the place, Sienna said as they approached. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, small living room and kitchen. Nothing fancy, but it's solid. New roof last year, updated electrical, decent heating, and AC. She unlocked the door and let them in, and Marcus felt something in his chest ease. It was small but not cramped, with hardwood floors that showed their age but had been recently refinished. The kitchen was tiny but had a window over the sink that let in good light. The bedrooms were both larger than what they had now, and the bathroom had a tub that actually looked deep enough for a proper bath. Lena ran through the space with Owen, who'd come along at his own insistence. The two of them claiming the second bedroom as perfect for sleepovers and making plans for where toys should go. Their voices echoed off the empty walls, filling the space with possibility. "What do you think?" Sienna asked quietly as Marcus stood in the living room, trying to imagine their secondhand furniture in this space, trying to picture building a life here. "I think it's great," he admitted. "Way better than where we are now. But, Sienna, I can't—" $800 a month, she interrupted. "That's what I'm asking. 800 plus utilities. Month-to-month lease to start. But we can convert to annual after a few months if you want the stability." $800 was actually $50 less than what he was currently paying for a worse apartment in a worse neighborhood. It was reasonable, fair even, not market rate for this area, but not so cheap that it felt like charity. Just on the low end of reasonable, the kind of rent a landlord might charge if they valued stability over profit maximization. "I could do 800,
Marcus said slowly. That's actually doable. Good. Then it's yours if you want it. I'll have my property manager draw up the lease tomorrow. You can move in whenever you want after you sign. First month's rent and a security deposit, which I'm willing to take in installments if that's easier. Marcus looked at her, this woman who was offering him exactly what he needed while somehow making it feel like a business transaction instead of charity.
She was good at this, at seeing what people needed and finding ways to provide it without making them feel small.
Why are you doing this? He asked.
Really?
Sienna considered the question seriously. Because you're my friend. Because Lena deserves a safe home. Because I have resources I don't need, and you have a problem I can solve, and it costs me basically nothing to help while meaning everything to you.
She met his eyes. Is that honest enough?
Yeah, Marcus said, his throat tight.
Yeah, that's honest.
So is that a yes?
He thought about Lena's excited chatter coming from the bedroom, about the relief of not having to frantically search for housing, about what it would mean to have stability and safety and a decent place to call home. He thought about pride and independence and the cost of refusing help when it was offered with genuine care.
Yes, he said finally.
Yes, we'll take it. Thank you.
Sienna's smile was radiant with relief.
You're welcome, truly. I'm glad I could help. They spent another hour at the apartment, measuring rooms and discussing logistics and letting the kids run wild through the empty space. By the time they left, Marcus had signed a preliminary agreement and put down a deposit, small enough to be manageable, large enough to feel real. The property manager would contact him tomorrow about the formal lease and move-in dates. As they stood outside by their cars, Lena and Owen once again saying goodbye with dramatic flair, Sienna said quietly, "Have you thought any more about the job offer?"
"Yeah," Marcus replied,
"and I think I'd like to at least hear more about it. Do an interview or whatever the normal process is. I'll have HR reach out tomorrow. They'll set up a formal interview, go through everything properly. If you get the job, it'll be because you're qualified, not because we're friends."
"Fair enough."
There was a moment of comfortable silence. Then Sienna said, "This is going to work, you know, us being friends. All of this. It's going to be okay."
"How can you be sure?" Marcus asked.
"Because we want it to work. Because we're both willing to be uncomfortable and honest and do the hard work of navigating the complicated parts. That's more than most friendships have going for them."
Marcus smiled. "When did you get so wise?"
"I'm not wise. I'm just stubborn and unwilling to give up on good things."
She returned his smile.
"Plus, Owen would never forgive me if I let his best friend disappear again. That kid holds grudges."
They parted ways with plans to meet at the park next Saturday, back to their routine, their rhythm, the thing that had worked before they'd let fear and pride derail it. Marcus drove home feeling lighter than he had in months, Lena chattering beside him about her new room and how they should paint it purple with stars on the ceiling.
The next weeks passed in a blur of forward momentum. Marcus interviewed for the facilities position, a formal sit-down with the HR director and the facilities manager, no mention of Sienna except as the person who'd referred him. He got the job on his own merits, started 2 weeks later, and immediately felt the difference that regular hours and steady pay made. He could breathe, he could plan, he could stop doing constant financial calculus every time Lena needed something. They moved into the duplex in mid-January, and true to her word, Sienna stayed completely out of the landlord-tenant relationship. When Marcus had a question about the lease, he called the property manager. When something broke, the kitchen faucet started dripping in week 2, he submitted a maintenance request through the official channels, and a plumber came out within 24 hours. It was professional and proper and exactly what Sienna had promised. But she helped with the move itself, showing up on a Saturday morning with Owen and a pickup truck she'd borrowed from somewhere, ready to haul boxes and furniture. Marcus protested that she didn't need to, but she just smiled and said friends help friends move, and that was that. They spent the day carrying Marcus's modest belongings into the new place, Owen and Lena helping, in the way 7-year-olds help, mostly getting in the way but keeping spirits high with their enthusiasm. By evening, the duplex was starting to feel like home. Marcus's furniture looked better here than it had in the old apartment, like the space was giving his belongings permission to be more than just functional. Lena's room was set up with her bed in the corner and her stuffed animals arranged just so.
and she'd already started covering the walls with drawings and pictures. They ordered pizza, Marcus's treat, though Sienna tried to insist on paying until he reminded her of their rules, and ate sitting on the floor of the living room because Marcus didn't have a kitchen table yet. Owen declared it the best dinner ever because eating on the floor was like camping, but inside, and Lena agreed enthusiastically. After they'd eaten, after Owen had dozed off on the couch and Lena had gone to bed in her new room, Marcus and Sienna sat on the front steps of the duplex, looking at the quiet street in the gathering dusk. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for all of it. The apartment, the job referral, the help moving. Thank you." "You're welcome," was Sienna replied. "But, you're doing me just as much good as I'm doing you." "How do you figure that?" "You've reminded me what actually matters. Before I met you and Lena, I was so caught up in quarterly earnings and market share and all the bullshit that comes with running a company that I'd forgotten why I started the business in the first place." She looked at him, her expression serious. "I wanted to build something meaningful, something that made people's lives better. But somewhere along the way, it became about growth for growth's sake, profit for profit's sake. You've helped me remember the human element. I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm really not. Watching you parent Lena with so much love, despite having so little margin for error. It's humbling. You've made me a better mom to Owen just by example." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. A car passed, its headlights sweeping across them briefly before moving on. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and fell silent. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said after a while. "Something I've been thinking about but haven't said yet?" "Always. I was so angry when I found out about your money. So embarrassed and hurt and convinced that our whole friendship had been some kind of lie." He picked at a loose thread on his jeans, not looking at her. "But the truth is, I think I was mostly scared. Scared that if you saw how I really lived, you'd realize I wasn't worth knowing. Scared that the friendship would end not because you were pretending, but because once you really understood the gap between our lives, you'd decide it was too much work to bridge." "And now?" Sienna asked softly. "Now I think maybe the friendship is stronger because we've faced that fear and come out the other side. We know exactly what we're working with, all the complications and differences and difficult parts, and we've chosen each other anyway." "We have," Sienna agreed, "and I'm grateful for that every day." Marcus finally looked at her, this woman who'd become so important to his life in such a short time. "I'm grateful too. For you, for Owen, for these Saturday afternoons that have become my favorite part of every week, for someone finally seeing me as more than just my circumstances. You're so much more than your circumstances, Marcus. You always have been." They sat there as the evening deepened into night, talking quietly about everything and nothing, about their kids and their hopes and the future that was starting to feel more like possibility than threat. Owen woke up around 8, groggy and confused about where he was, and Sienna gathered him up with practiced ease. "We should go," she said. "Let you finish settling in. But same time next Saturday?" "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied. He watched them drive away, then went back inside to check on Lena. She was asleep already, exhausted from the day's excitement, her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. Marcus stood in the doorway of her new room, her room, in their new home, in a life that was finally starting to feel stable and secure, and felt emotion well up in his chest. They'd made it. Through grief and poverty and pride and fear, they'd made it to something that looked surprisingly like okay. Better than okay, even. They had a home and jobs and friends and each other, and that was more than Marcus had dared to hope for in a long time. The months that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and eternal. Saturday afternoons at Herman Park became the anchor point of their weeks, the thing everything else revolved around. Marcus's job turned out to be a good fit, challenging enough to keep him engaged, but stable enough to provide security. The regular hours meant he could pick Lena up from school every day, could help with homework without being too exhausted to think, could actually be present instead of just surviving. Owen started coming over for playdates at the duplex, and Lena went to Sienna's penthouse, which was indeed huge and intimidating, but also filled with books and Owen's extensive toy collection and a warmth that came from being well-loved
rather than just expensive. The kids navigated between these two worlds with the easy adaptability of childhood, never once suggesting that one was better than the other, just different. Marcus and Sienna navigated their own friendship through the complications of real life. They disagreed sometimes about parenting approaches and politics and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They had awkward moments when the wealth disparity became impossible to ignore, when Sienna would casually mention things that Marcus couldn't imagine affording. But they worked through it with honesty and humor and the growing trust that came from choosing each other repeatedly. On a Saturday in late March, 6 months after that first dinner at Rosie's Diner, they were back at their bench watching the kids play when Sienna said, "I have something I want to ask you, but I'm worried you'll say no out of reflex." Marcus braced himself. "Okay, hit me with it." "Owen's having a birthday party next month. Big thing at the house, bounce house, magician, the whole 9 yards. And he wants Lena there, obviously, but also—" She paused, seeming uncertain. "He wants you there, too. Not as a parent volunteer or whatever, but as a guest, as my friend." "Sienna, before you say no, just listen. I know it'll be weird. I know most of the people there will be from Owen's school, which means they're mostly parents with money. I know you'll be uncomfortable, and honestly, I'll probably be uncomfortable too because those people drive me crazy. But Owen specifically asked if you'd come, and I'd really like you there as moral support." Marcus thought about it, about walking into Sienna's world deliberately, about facing the kind of people who'd look at him and immediately categorize him as lesser, about whether his discomfort mattered more than Owen's wishes and Sienna's request. "Will there be cake?" he asked finally. Sienna blinked, surprised by the question. "What? Will there be cake at this party? Because I make decisions about social events I'll hate, based primarily on the dessert situation." She laughed, relief flooding her face. "Yes, there will be excellent cake. Owen requested chocolate with vanilla frosting and those little candy decorations." "Then yeah, okay, I'll come. But I'm not wearing a suit." "God, please don't. Nobody actually wants to see you in a suit. Come as you are. That's the whole point." Owen's birthday party was exactly as overwhelming as Marcus had feared. The penthouse was packed with people who all seemed to know each other, who all had that casual wealth confidence that came from never worrying about money. Their kids wore designer clothes and talked about vacations to places Marcus had only seen in movies. The adults discussed property values and stock portfolios, and threw around numbers that made his head spin. But Lena was having the time of her life playing with Owen and the other kids, and Sienna stayed close to Marcus, running interference when people got too obnoxious and introducing him simply as "my friend Marcus" without elaboration or explanation. He helped with the practical things, corralling kids for the magician, cutting cake, cleaning up spills, and found himself actually enjoying parts of it despite the fish-out-of-water feeling. The moment that mattered most came near the end, when Owen was opening presents. There was an overwhelming pile of expensive gifts, video games and elaborate toys and things that probably cost more than Marcus's rent. When Owen got to Marcus and Lena's gift, a set of books about space that Marcus had saved up for, nothing fancy but chosen carefully, the boy's face lit up like they'd given him the moon. "Oh, wow! The Mars trilogy! I've been wanting these forever." Owen clutched the books to his chest, genuine joy radiating from him. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Lena. These are so cool." And just like that, Marcus felt the evening's tension ease. Because a 7-year-old who got genuinely excited about books in the middle of an avalanche of expensive presents was going to turn out okay. And a mother who'd raised a kid like that, despite having money that could have spoiled him rotten, was doing something right. As they were leaving, Sienna walked them to the elevator. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I know it was hard." "It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be," Marcus admitted. "Your friends are kind of insufferable, though." "Oh, I know. I can't stand most of them. That's why I need actual friends like you around." She smiled. "Same time next Saturday?" "Owen's already planning something involving the frisbee and extreme jumping." "We'll be there." The elevator doors closed on Sienna's wave, and Marcus looked down at Lena, who was already half asleep against his side. "Good party, baby girl?" "The best," she murmured. "Owen's my best friend in the whole world." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Spring turned to summer, and their Saturday tradition continued unbroken. They tried new playgrounds sometimes, went to the zoo once, even braved the heat for a day at the splash pad. But more often than not, they returned to Herman Park, to their bench, to the space where this unlikely friendship had first taken root. On a Saturday in late June, Marcus arrived at the park to find Sienna already there, sitting on their bench with a distant expression that suggested she was thinking about something heavy. Owen and Lena ran off immediately, but Marcus sat down with concern. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." She turned to look at him. "Do you remember that day at the diner? That first Thursday?" "Of course." "I've been thinking about what brought us there. What brought all of us there at that exact moment. If we'd arrived 10 minutes earlier or later, if I'd chosen a different booth, if Owen hadn't noticed that Lena was hungry, this whole friendship might never have happened." "But it did happen," Marcus pointed out. "It did. And it changed everything for me. For Owen. For both of us, I think." She smiled, and there was something bittersweet in it. "You didn't just change my life, Marcus. You brought us back to life. Before you and Lena, Owen and I were just going through motions, work and school, and all the things we were supposed to do without really feeling any of it. You reminded us what connection feels like." "Sienna, I think you're forgetting that I needed this just as much as you did," Marcus said. "Maybe more. I was drowning before we met you, barely keeping my head above water, so focused on survival that I'd forgotten to actually live." "So we saved each other then?" "Yeah, I guess we did." They watched their children play, these two kids who should never have crossed paths but had become inseparable through the simple act of adults being brave enough to bridge an invisible divide. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground, painting everything in shades of gold. "You know what I've learned from all this?" Sienna asked. "What you've taught me." "What's that?" "That the walls between people, between different lives, different circumstances, they're mostly illusions we maintain because they're easier than actually connecting, but they're not real. Not if we choose not to let them be real." "That's pretty profound for a Saturday afternoon," Marcus said with a slight smile. "I'm a profound person on Saturdays. Monday through Friday, I'm mostly just stressed and bossy, but Saturdays bring out my philosophical side." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the playground where their children were building something elaborate in the sandbox. A tower, naturally, because some things never changed. Two families who met over shared fries had built something far greater than either of them could have imagined. A friendship that bridged worlds, a connection that made both of their lives immeasurably richer. As the afternoon faded toward evening and it was time to go their separate ways, Marcus to his duplex where dinner needed making and homework needed supervising, Sienna to her penthouse where similar routines waited. They stood by their cars in the parking lot and made the same promise they'd made every Saturday for the past 8 months. Same time next week? Wouldn't miss it for the world. Because some things, once found, were worth keeping. Some friendships, once built, deserved protection. And some moments, like that first Thursday at a diner when a billionaire looked at a hungry child and chose kindness over convenience, echoed forward through time, creating ripples that changed everything. Marcus drove home with Lena dozing beside him, the evening light golden on the dashboard, thinking about how strange and wonderful life could be. How a meal shared could become a friendship built, could become a life transformed. How sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone see you fully, all your struggles and scars and imperfections, and trust that they'd see your humanity instead of just your circumstances. He'd been wrong about so many things. Wrong to think that different worlds couldn't touch. Wrong to believe that pride mattered more than connection. Wrong to assume that accepting help meant admitting defeat. But being wrong had led him here, to stability and friendship and a future that looked less like survival and more like actually living. That night, after Lena was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Marcus sat on his front steps and thought about the past year, about grief and struggle, about meeting Sienna and almost losing her, about learning to accept help and building something that looked surprisingly like a real life. His phone buzzed with the text from Sienna, a photo of Owen asleep with the space books Marcus had given him for his birthday, the caption reading, "Still his favorites." Marcus smiled and texted back a picture of Lena's drawing from earlier that day, a family portrait that included not just Marcus and Lena, but Owen and Sienna, too, all of them holding hands under a sky full of stars, and a banner that read, best friends forever, in 7-year-old handwriting. Sienna's response was immediate, a heart emoji, then forever sounds about right. And it did. It really did. Because some friendships weren't built on shared circumstances or common backgrounds or any of the usual foundations. Some friendships were built on something simpler and more profound, on seeing each other fully, accepting each other completely, and choosing connection over the easy comfort of staying in separate worlds. The evening deepened into night, and Marcus stayed on his front steps a while longer, watching the neighborhood settle into its nightly rhythms. Tomorrow was Sunday, and he'd take Lena to the library like they did every week. Monday, he'd go to work, doing a job he was good at and actually enjoyed. And next Saturday, they'd meet at Herman Park, sitting on their bench, watching their children play, continuing the friendship that had started with French fries and had grown into something neither of them could imagine living without. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be struggles and awkward moments and complications that came from their different circumstances. But it was real, and it was good, and it was theirs. A new beginning built on kindness and courage and love that didn't care about worlds or wallets, only hearts. And that, Marcus thought as he finally headed inside, was more than enough. It was everything.